the pre-show to the show, which, as far as I'm concerned, is my license to behave like a total savage on screen without consequence. So that's what I will do, probably. We are going to go down the road to see what we can find, perhaps a leopard. It's quite cloudy today. David is on camera. He's returned from holiday. He's looking beached and browned. Hello, David. Lovely to have you with us again. Yes. And also, as I always like to say, this is an opportunity for you to click on the bell under the subscribe button. A completely nonsensical activity, given that you know that we're live, otherwise you wouldn't be with us now. I somehow feel it's a little bit like those time travel loops in the plot of movies, where you have to really suspend belief to understand what has happened. I don't suppose many of you will make that connection now, given the way that I've explained it, but that's okay. It's very early in the morning still, and we're all still absorbing the energy of the new day. I think the temperature is probably around 22 degrees Celsius, 71 degrees Fahrenheit. You notice how I checked the weather there, David? Yeah, that feels a little cooler than that today, a little cooler. On account of the fact that there is a little wind blowing in from the southeast. One must clear one's throat, and of course, warm the jaw. We have to do that before choir practice, David. We had to warm our jaws. And we had to go. And then only the tenors carried on, you see. The basses ceased at that point. We had to go down the way. Alex, go again with that, please. Alex has come up with something for me to warm my lips with. Round the ragged rocks, the ragged rascal ran. Round the ragged rocks, the ragged rascal ran. Round the ragged rocks, the ragged rascal ran. The dyke had jumped up over the log and ran into the drainage line. Round the ragged rocks, the ragged rascal ran. Round the ragged rocks, the ragged rascal ran. And then there was a bird calling in the woods. Bird calling in the woods, bird calling in the woods. Bird calling in the woods. Calling in the woods, bird calling in the woods, 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 in the woods. Run the ragged rocks, the ragged rocks ran. Run the ragged rocks, the ragged rocks ran. Bye.
This program features live coverage of an African safari and may include animal kills and carcasses. Viewer discretion is advised.
And a very good morning to all of you, and welcome to another glorious start to the day here in the African bush, where the little antelope are celebrating surviving the night. This is Safari Live.
Ready. Standing by.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You are live, you are live.
And as I said, a very good morning to all of you, and welcome to a glorious sunrise safari. That's so cute. My name is Jamie, and this morning I have Brian on camera with me, and of course the thumb tagging along for the ride and contributing immensely, actually, to the camera work that's happening on the back of this vehicle. We're coming to you live from a place called Djuma Private Game Reserve, which is in the Greater Kruger National Park area of South Africa. And we're starting off our morning with the most adorable sight that I think that this time of year has to offer, which is our collection of impala lambs that have been bouncing around this morning. They are in, as I said earlier, they are in seriously high spirits. Oh, so much so that they at one point went into completely mad dashes and ran in a full circle with their poor frantic mothers chasing after them. And this happened about 5 minutes before the start of the sunrise safari, which seems to be, there's a certain inevitability to that, but I'm hoping that they might do it again now, because the air was filled with the sound of frantic mothers and babies calling to each other to try and reunite once again. Now, this is the perfect time to stop and watch our many, many baby impala. Remember 2 weeks ago where we were looking for our very first little wobbly wet baby impala, and now it seems as though, oh, fight, see what I mean? They're having a marvelous time, I think. Either that or they're having a serious childhood tantrum with each other. Now, the wonderful thing about this safari experience is that it is 100% live, which means it is also interactive, and you can send through your questions, and you can do that on #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@wildearth.tv. And just take a second to marvel at the fact that these galloping, prancing little creatures, some of them are only a few days old, some of the littler ones might only be a few hours old, and yet they have this astounding ability to run and jump and leap, and all in all are equipped or come equipped with all of the coordination that they'll need to survive. Their poor mothers just trying to get some breakfast in, really. My little ones, have we all calmed down now? I'm going to sit with these impala for just a little bit longer to see what happens, but James would like to start off his morning with a beautiful feathered creature to show you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm whispering because I do not want Mrs. Red-backed Shrike to disappear into the bush in which she's sitting. My name is James. David is on camera, and that is Matilda, the red-backed shrike. I don't think that's really her name, everyone. I just made that up. #SafariLive, questions@wildearth.tv if you want to talk to us. And we do want you to talk to us. So it's kind of compulsory that you do. Now look carefully. The most obvious feature of a shrike, of course, is that tooth at the front of the beak, which you can see very nicely there. And the red-backed shrike is a completely sexually dimorphic bird. In other words, the male looks nothing like the female. He has a red back and a black bandit's mask and a grey head. She is much less conspicuous and is therefore able to hide much more successfully than her husband, who, much like the peacock, is designed to show off his colours to attract the ladies. she is sitting in a spikethorn bush, a red spikethorn. You can see that from the spikes, not from the redness of the leaves. I don't know why it's called red spikethorn. It is very clearly not red in the slightest. I'm telling you a lie, David. Why didn't you tell me to stop talking nonsense? I think actually it is... You know what? No, it is. Sorry, it is a spikethorn bush, everybody. Yes, it's a spikethorn. Gymnosporia senegalensis. This is the best female redback shrike's view I think I've ever had. And around them, of course, you can hear the ring-necked dove. One or two francolins in the distance. And the orange-breasted bush shrike, who seems to have got out of bed early today. They normally only call in the heat of the day. The redback shrike has a fairly sort of nondescript chissicking call. It goes tsk, 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 tsk. Sounds nothing like that, but sort of, not really. Hello, William. You say the redback shrike is number 72 on your bird list. Good stuff. And many of you, of course, added the bearded robin to your lists yesterday. That was a special bird to begin with. Yes, bearded robin, that's exactly what I said to you. And I started seeing these things actually only yesterday. So I think they arrived back a few days ago. So interestingly, the migrants arrive throughout the kind of season. We're still missing the carmine bee-eater. They are not expected, I don't think, till January. But otherwise, I think everything else is here. The European bee-eater, at least the European roller, which is often one of the last to arrive, is here. The redback shrike now. The cuckoo, you might be able to hear in the background. Cuckoo, 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 cuckoo. Excuse me. All right, Mrs. Redback Shrike, I think you have provided us with sufficient entertainment for the day. Hello, everyone. For those of you who watched the pre-show show, I'm very sorry about that. That's just the way it is. We're going to go down here towards Twin Dams and see if we can't pick up on tracks of Hoshana, the little chief, son of the Queen Karula. With any luck, we'll find Karula and Trungile as well. Are you ready? Here we go. Jamie is now with another antelope, so let's go and find out what it is and what it's doing.
I'm still with the same antelope. They're just keeping me so thoroughly entertained that I absolutely cannot drag myself away from these little baby impala. Although there is one sort of very clearly different member of the group in the form of this large male Inyala that is wandering through. Just taking advantage of the whole safety in numbers process. Now, a moment ago, the entire open area in front of me was filled with impala. Oh, hold on, here we come. Here comes a whole dashing load of them. The bouncing babies are utterly adorable. And they're being... There we go. They've been sparked off by the male, the male impala are still convinced somehow, and despite the presence of many tiny pitter-patters of little feet, they're still convinced that somehow they're going to have a chance to mate. The hormones have got them very confused, and they have mistaken pregnancy hormones for estrus hormones or heat hormones, and as a result they are tormenting the poor females. And as soon as the females start to run, of course, the little babies go with them, and so you have mass panic generated by one ram. And here he comes now. I know this ram, actually. He's going to pop out. Here, he's going to pop out by that big marula over there, Brian. Here he goes. I'm sorry, I'm looking... that's okay. He's walking now in front of the Nyala ram. There he goes. I actually know this ram. He's walking to the left there. He's got one patch of mange or something similar around his eye, and it's given him a very, very dark eye. You'll have to take my word for it, though, because he's refusing to turn around. And still following on behind the females, strutting his stuff, very proud of himself that he's managed to collect such a large harem, despite the fact that he's gone into a complete false rut, as they all have, and there's no chance at all that any of them are going to be able to mate with him. Alright, since they've all now scattered off a little bit further, I think let's try and get closer and try and go around and see whether or not we can observe the antics of the little lambs a bit further. I've noticed that as well, Liz. It seems as though a few of the lambs are already tasting the leaves, and of course none of them are ready for solid food yet, but impala do develop very quickly, so they'll start feeding off solid food at a few weeks old, and they'll be fully weaned within a couple of months. So they do develop very, very quickly so that their mothers can get on with the next cycle of breeding in the next 6 months or so. But I think it's a case of imitating. I think they're watching, they're exploring their world, much like we see the hyena do when they chew on stuff. That's also a teething thing. But when we see all baby animals, they're very tactile in their exploration of the world and learning what is good to eat and what is not. And they do that by imitating their moms, imitating the diet of their mothers. And you see a lot of animals do it. My best example is baby white rhino. That's something I've seen quite a few times, and before they're about 6 months old, when they start to feed off solid food, if you watch them, they go and imitate their moms, but they haven't got the teeth for it. But they use that big wide top lip, and they grab a mouthful of grass and they kind of go and then spit it out. And it's highly entertaining to watch, and I think that's exactly the same thing that's happening with these impala. They're just keeping us entertained and keeping themselves entertained. If you all turn around and run back in the opposite direction, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. Oh, there goes the ram again. He's going to chase them all back to where we were. He is too. Oh, Brian, if I had but stayed for 2 seconds, we would have seen that. Oh, well. You win some, you lose some. Oh, here we go, here we go. He goes dashing above the termite mound. And I'm hoping you can hear the contact calls. They've all gone quiet again. Oh, he's herding them back towards us. Oh, good. I'm so glad we moved, now that he's chased them all back to where we were. Oh, the joys of live wildlife filming. Sometimes it actually pays to just sit in one place and wait for something to happen. The rest of the females are quite happily ignoring the male. That's a very good question from Paul, and it's something that we've been discussing at length because it's actually quite difficult to find official statistics. And I don't think any of us have been speaking to the other guides. None of us really know exactly what the survival percentage rate will be for these impala lambs. Most of us are guessing around 50%. So roughly 50% of them will survive their first year. And then obviously after that, their survival rate increases tremendously just because they're stronger, faster, more alert. And I hate to say it, but the clever ones survive. Well, the smart ones survive a lot of the time. Some of the lucky ones to an extent. Oh, goodness. Hold on. I'm going to just catch up with them. So it's probably somewhere around 50%. Finding official... Sorry. Luckily, we've got the gentle squeak of Jigger's brakes to keep us company while we move. The statistics will differ from area to area and from place to place. So finding official statistics on impala survival rate is difficult, and it'll differ depending on your concentration of leopards and wild dogs. the south, for example, the southern part of the Sabi Sand may well have a slightly lower survival rate because they've got a higher concentration of leopards in that area around the rivers. So that might be a slightly lower one. Areas where there are denning wild dogs, where, although I think most of the pups at the moment are now at the point where they're running with the rest of the herd. But denning wild dogs will also make a tremendous difference, because when wild dogs den, they of course have to move backwards and forwards. Look at these two. Ah, they stopped as I said that. Most of the denning wild dogs will keep returning to the den site to feed the pups, which means that impala herds in that vicinity will probably suffer higher losses than others. So we don't know the exact survival rate in this area, but most of us are guessing around 50%. It might even be slightly high. The mortality rate might even be slightly higher. Already we've seen Karula kill 2 that we know of. She's probably killed more. Look at those jumps. Already stotting. Already having a marvelous time showing off their physical abilities. Stotting is a type of antelope stride that indicates to predators that they're fit and healthy. And welcome to Egg Sack. I haven't heard your name in a while. Egg Sack used to be S Hack, but I misheard Egg Sack's name, and I thought that Rebecca had said Egg Sack, at which point Egg Sack very kindly changed their name so that I would not be confused anymore. So Egg Sack, welcome back to the Sunrise Safari. How cute are these two? You wanted to know what the top speed of an impala is. Very, very fast. You're probably looking at around, I would say, at least 50 miles per hour. You're looking maybe 70 kilometers. Perhaps slightly less, but they are very rapid creatures, which is why a leopard will never try and hunt them out in the open like this, unless there's a little bit of cover that they can sneak behind. Sometimes Karula gets lucky, but a leopard or a lion, they won't even bother to try, and if they've been spotted, they're not even going to bother to try and chase them, because they just know that they cannot sustain the speed. Here's an interesting thing that I've noticed. From what I've seen, the females seem to be faster than the males, even when they're highly pregnant. And I have to say that has afforded me a degree of amusement to watch the males sprinting behind the female at top speed, and they just can't catch them. They can't get anywhere near them. I don't know why it is. Perhaps it's their lighter build. They're slightly more athletic. They seem to be faster than the males. And they also, of course, have a far better stamina. A wild dog hunt, on the other hand, where wild dogs can pretty much match the speed of an impala, plus there's a pack of them chasing. If you combine that with the fact that they have stamina that outlasts. Oh, there we go, racing at the back. Here he goes again. You're exhausting yourself, mister. If you factor in the fact that wild dogs can actually run for longer than impala, and you realize that really if a wild dog pack were to come through here now, one of these impala would not stand a chance. Death would be inevitable. We just don't know. That's where the safety in numbers comes in. All of the little ones gather together in their nurseries, and we'll see this more and more as they get older. They will start to move away from their moms and spend far more time in little groups. Janie, you wanted to know what I think the most interesting common behavior is that I've seen across the board with these babies. That is a very, very good question. I think it's the one that I have, and I know I've commented on this a few times, but I think it is their amazing stotting ability. It's the fact that when they start to run, even though they don't know why they're running in the sort of with the panic of the herd, but when they start to run, they're already doing the handstands and the sort of the big high springs, almost slow motion leaps that the adult impala do. And I always find it fascinating watching any kind of baby animal demonstrate their amazing instincts. That's not learned behavior. They've just, well, maybe it is. Maybe it's mimicked behavior, but I doubt it. I think it's most likely that they're demonstrating that behavior instinctively. They start to run and something in them goes, now jump. Now do a handstand. I know that sounds ridiculous, but impala really do handstands. Sometimes to the point that you actually worry their back's going to break because they flick their legs right over, their bum goes right over their heads. It's amazing to watch. I think that's probably my most, the highest level that they have in terms of fascination for me. And then the exploration, the point that Liz pointed out as well, about them nibbling on the leaves, because we saw the very first baby impala, saw it walk up to the termite residue all along a tree and go up and lick it. And I don't know if that was looking for salt or if it was looking, I haven't seen any of the others do it. So, and I know you said across the board, but I haven't seen any of the others do it, but I think it's part and parcel of the same reflex, which is, what's this? Let me taste it. Some of you with toddlers perhaps might know that, that particular tendency of small creatures. What is this? I'd better put it in my mouth just to investigate. All right. I think for now our impala have calmed down and have settled to go about eating their breakfast. But let us head across to Mr. Henry so that he can tell you what his plans are.
Just up there, everybody, is the Hardydar nest, and unfortunately they're not doing much of the playing as they were yesterday, or not trying to feed yesterday. Mum is sitting on top of them. Very glad that as a mammal I didn't have to have my mother sitting on top of me in order to stay warm. It's a little bit chilly this morning, but maybe they'll pop out just now. So we are obviously at Twin Dams. That's where this nest is. And around here somewhere, little Hosanna was seen yesterday afternoon. Now I have found no sign of him, no tracks, nothing. And so I wonder where he has gone. We've checked the southern boundary, didn't see any tracks there. That's not to say he couldn't have crossed or didn't cross. Now, if you listen very carefully, you can hear a kind of hissing noise. Shh, 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 shh. That's the little Hardydar chicks saying that they'd like to go out and play now, please. And Mum has said, no, I will sit on you for a little bit longer. I will squash you to this very thorny, fairly uncomfortable nest with my own being. I too would be going, shh, 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 if my mother, when I was an infant, had put me in a bed that looked like that. Some nests, of course, look so delightfully comfortable. The ones that the grey penduline tit makes, for example, completely soft. I mean, you can't believe how they manage to gather sufficient substance to make them so very soft and lovely. The Hardydar, not quite the same. David, I think I have just spotted a hoopoe's nest. Do you see the big jackalberry tree there?
Yes.
Now, just before the foliage starts, there's a hole.
Yep.
There, it just flew out.
Got him.
There it is. I think that's a hoopoo nest, everybody. The African hoopoo. Ha! Take that, Scott Dyson. Scott Dyson, in case you're wondering, everybody, was a nest finder extraordinaire. He could find a nest just about everywhere he looked. But I think that is a hoopoo nest. I'm going to sneak slightly closer, actually, because these chaps aren't coming out yet. Their mother wishes them to stay in their thorny bed for slightly longer, toughen them up a bit. And watch this hornbill. I think there's a hornbill nest here as well. Let's just watch the hornbill. It's brought something back, and it brought something back yesterday. Oh, here we go. There it is. Yes, there's the nest. How cool is that? So you can't see what's in there, can you, everybody? Oh no. But I suspect it's either the little babies or Mum, or both. So she's either incubating the eggs in there, or she's popped out already and it's just the little ones in there. That is really fantastic. We saw him coming back yesterday. but we didn't see him feed anything. He just arrived on this tree with a caterpillar, and then I think he got a fright or something while we were looking at the hardy-dars. That's very cool. 2 nests in one day, that's very unusual for me. Well, 1 nest in a month is unusual for me. We'll just stop here and see if we can't hear some little hoopoes. Christina, what a nice question from you. You say, if a snake found the nest, would it take one chick and then come back later for the others? I suppose it depends on the snake, really. If it was something like a boomslang or tree snake, it's a little bit smaller than something like a mamba or a cobra. I suspect you'll find that they would devour everything that they could in the nest at the same time, though. Let's just see if we can't get some kind of view. No, it's just a black hole. But that most assuredly is the nest of the African hoopoo. I'll quickly show you a picture in case you are confused as to what an African hoopoo looks like. Ha for hoopoo. Ha. Hoopoo. 276 hoopoo. There he is there. Number 4. The African hoop hoop. Or in Afrikaans known as the hoop hoop. O nee, kyk daar's 'n hoep hoep. Right, there we are. That is the language of Afrikaans, aka Pidgin Dutch. Right, here we go. Let's get going before I say something silly. Oh dear, the car won't start. There we go. Hello, Cynic Gamer. It's a lovely name you have for the early morning. You say, oh, Fennec. Fennec Gamer? Fennec Gamer? Very interesting name. There is a Nyala Fennec Gamer, while I consider the various ways your name could have been created. You say, have we ever noticed the effects of the increasing temperature bringing in species that shouldn't perhaps be here? Fennec Gamer, that's a good question, but you must understand also that over time these things do take time with the increasing pressure. What we're going to notice is not so much an influx of species that were never here before. What you will notice is subtle changes in how long birds are staying. Will they stay for a long time? Will they perhaps go away a little bit earlier than they might have otherwise? What you also notice, I think, over time, especially in the absence of human intervention, would be a thickening of the bush. We do know that the increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere it favors bush, favors the carbon cycle that occurs inside woody plants as opposed to inside herbaceous plants like grasses. So if you were to leave this area completely, I think you would find that over time, in the absence of elephants, for example, bush encroachment would happen. And yes, there will be perhaps an increase in, this area is already very hot, but as you go towards cooler areas, for example, like Johannesburg, up onto the Highveld, you'll find that things like mosquitoes will start to increase in a place like that because they will start to get a little bit warmer. So I don't think it's so much the hot areas that are going to be affected. I think it's far more areas that are colder, that exclude animals during the cold season, that are going to perhaps experience an influx of species that aren't always there. That makes sense, Fennec Gamer? Right, we're going to do a little foray along the southern boundary again, towards Treehouse Dam, and see if we don't find something there. And Fuzzman Sparkles, nice to hear from you again. I'm just looking up at the Hadedar nest. No, she's still there. There's a kingfisher calling. Fuzzman Sparkles, you say, have I ever seen a crowned hornbill on Juma? I haven't seen one on Juma, no. But I have seen two. I've seen one other kind of hornbill here. I've seen the trumpeter hornbill, which has got a great big casque on the top of its beak, and it goes. It sounds like a very, very sad baby. Anyway, I've heard one of those before here. And not here, but further down south, I have seen a crowned hornbill. Now, a crowned hornbill, for those of you, well, I suppose rather than describe it, I may as well show you a picture. Ha! For hornbill. The cuckoo. But I can't see it. There is the crowned hornbill there. Now he's a bit bigger than the averaged yellow-billed by about 6 inches or so. I'm not sure why he's called crowned, because he doesn't have a very obvious crown in any way. Very nice. There he is. Then the trumpeter hornbill is that fellow there. So he is really quite impressive. Dreadful call, really. It sounds like wailing babies. And apparently that casque, I believe, helps that sound to travel. I'm not convinced that that is the case. I think it's probably just a kind of peacock's feather adaptation. In other words, it's there to attract the ladies. Very nice. This is the trumpeter hornbill. I also saw an oriental pied hornbill, which looks quite similar, in Thailand when I was there recently. Anastasia, I'm sorry I missed your question. How many eggs does which bird lay? Hornbills in general, I think, lay 2 to 3 eggs. Of course, that might be a blatant lie, so I'm going to check for you. Because for me to lie to you, Anastasia, especially with your, well, it's a very, very iconic name, that, isn't it? The Russian in the final control will be most interested by the fact that you have the name of the Princess of Russia. Maybe he won't. Breeding. Monogamous, seals herself. Natural tree cavity. Alex is frowning, apparently. That's very odd. That's not unusual, Anastasia, don't worry. He frowns most of the day. 2 to 6 eggs, believe it or not. 3 to 4, that's the yellow-billed hornbill. And the red-billed, 3 to 8. An average of 4. So 3 to 4, but up to 8. That's interesting. I very seriously doubt that all of them survive. The ground hornbill, of course, is typical and very clearly known for laying 2 eggs, one of which is an insurance policy, and one of which will almost certainly die. So they do not raise 2 chicks, they will only raise 1 chick. And so what the Ground Hornbill Research Project does is goes and takes the second egg out of the nest and incubates and raises them in captivity. Because ground hornbills are not very good at breeding in captivity. They don't like doing it very much. Oh. That's another female red-backed shrike. We thought it was a male, I'm afraid. Well, I did. Okay, Jamie's got a, well, furry donkey-like antelope. Let's go and find out what it's doing today.
I've actually got several furry donkey-like antelope. They're all, at the moment, hiding behind some bushes. They were out in the open. There we go. One female stepping out. These furry donkey-like antelope, as James describes them, which I think is the perfect expression, are waterbuck. A particularly furry animal, and one that carries a very, very distinctive smell of, as VM describes it, slightly off Oros, I think was his description. James goes along the lines of leather. Oh no, sorry, VM's description for the slightly off Oros was for elephant bulls in must. Oros, by the way, is a type of very, just to call it a juice concentrate would be a stretch of the imagination, a drink concentrate here in South Africa. I don't think it really qualifies as, I don't think there's any kind of original fruit in that particular substance. But it does carry a very distinctive scent. But sorry, it was elephants that VM applied that description to, not to waterbuck. Waterbuck have a leathery smell. Now, all of our waterbuck are also pregnant at the moment. Well, not all of them, but quite a few of them. They don't have a strict breeding season in the same way that impala do, but there is a massive peak in terms of births around this time of year. And that makes sense for all of our herbivores, because the more rain there is, the more food there is to eat, and therefore all the better to raise one's little ones with. I think that it was Brent yesterday who had a female waterbuck that he thought perhaps might be going into labor. And we're basically stopping to check each and every single antelope herd that we come upon to see whether or not any of them have given birth or if there's any new little ones. Baby waterbuck are utterly adorable. They are the fluffiest, cutest little things you can imagine. However, unlike the impala, where all of the babies gather together in the herd, initially, when a female waterbuck has a little one, she'll move away. She'll have it in isolation, as with most antelope, but she'll leave it isolated. So she'll actually, and you'll find that with most of our larger antelope species, or a lot of the large antelope species, they will leave their little ones to hide away during the day, and they'll return back once or twice during the day to feed them and to make sure that they're well looked after. Then they'll go off, they'll leave the baby lying up somewhere hidden in the vegetation, and off they'll go to see if they can get some breakfast for themselves. And it's interesting, it's an interesting approach that these waterbuck adopt. And I have to say something, that one on the right, Brian, underneath her tail, I can't, I'm hesitant to say. That could just be that a change in diet has caused a little bit of constipation, but there is some kind of a substance stuck underneath her tail, and it could be potentially afterbirth. I know that it's slightly unpleasant to look at, but just have a quick look. That's interesting. The back of her legs also look a little bit wet. Although I think if she had just given birth, I would have expected her to still be with her little one, suckling it and gently grooming it. It's impossible to say, and unfortunately she's now moved off into some very dense vegetation. And Dark Princess, I think I've misunderstood your question. Okay, sorry, Dark Princess. Apparently I can't hear. I thought you were asking if waterbuck were the same as beards that you have in America. The question is not that. You've asked if waterbuck are the same as deer. They're our South African equivalent of deer, but they are not deer. They are most definitely not deer, although they're quite furry, so you'll have to forgive my misunderstanding here. They're actually walking towards the road. I think that might make life a bit easier for us. So Dark Princess, they are our equivalent ecologically of deer, but they are not deer. They are antelope, which is a completely separate order. And one of the big things that will separate an antelope from a deer is the horns of an antelope. Hello. Which obviously our female antelope don't, or at least some of our female waterbuck don't have. except in very, very rare situations, but the males do. And all of the antelope that have horns out here, it is made of bone, not of hardened blood vessels and keratin in the same way it is with deer's antlers. And that is one of the most fundamental differences between a deer and antelope. So they're not deer, and there's a few other ones, slightly different tooth structures, slightly different, obviously completely different ecology of the area, but the main difference is the horns. So our antelope, once they grow their horns, in which this lady will never do, but once they do grow their horns, that's permanent. Those horns will be there for the rest of their lives unless they break them, in which case if it is broken, that's it, that's the end. They will not grow another set of horns. If it's damaged in some way, it will not necessarily recover because it's solid bone covered by a keratin sheath. So they don't shed them once a year. They do, in certain species, the females do have horns, but it is still bone, and it is still permanent. So it is something that completely separates antelope from deer. So these are antelope. But they are basically, ecologically speaking, they're basically big ruminant members of the South African ecology. So in a way, they are very, very similar to deer. I've lost track of that female that we were looking at. I'm not sure which one she is now. It might just have been a change in diet caused. She did look a bit bulgy, but it's a bit more difficult to see pregnant waterbuck. They're so fluffy and covered with fur. It's not always an easy call to make. I'm going to reposition just one more time just to try and see her. As I said, waterbuck they do leave their little ones lying up all on their own, hidden away, which it's interesting that there's such completely opposing strategies by antelope to raise their young. The larger ones, the ones we refer to as horse antelope, gemsbok or oryx, roan, sable, all of which we don't really see here. Well, we could see a sable. We could potentially. It's just very unlikely. Okay, let's stay here and just have a look at our waterbuck. Michael, you wanted to know why it is we call them waterbuck, especially when they live in a habitat similar to this. Very, very valid point. If you go further to the south in this area, if you go towards the larger rivers, you will see waterbuck quite a few waterbuck will spend a great deal of their time wading about in rivers. They like the soft food there. However, they don't need that river. They are water-dependent animals. They have to drink, but they don't need to live in water or to spend a lot of time wandering through water in the same way that some waterbuck do in the more southern areas towards Big Sabi River, Olifants. If you go anywhere in the southern sections of Kruger, you'll see waterbuck striding through rivers. The name waterbuck is a bit of a deceptive one for that reason. However, they are related to antelope called lechwe, and in areas where presumably the name would have stemmed from would have been the sort of marshy areas of Botswana. She does look pregnant to me. This female does, at least. So lechwe, very, very closely related to waterbuck, so much so that there was actually a case of a hybridization between a waterbuck and a lechwe, producing what I can only imagine was called a lechbuck, or potentially a waterware. Not quite sure what the name would be for a baby lechwe waterbuck combination. And in those areas, waterbuck and lechwe do spend most of their time in water. So that is where the name has come from. But it's a tricky one. It is a deceptive one, especially up here in the northern Sabi Sand, where of course we don't have any big water structures. The dams are artificial for the most part. The Mulwati is a true river, but the great Mulwati that doesn't actually flow. I've never seen it flowing. Apparently it has before, but in rare circumstances and very, very, very briefly. Yes, you raise a very valid point. You might even find, And I would guess that this would be the case with waterbuck, being quite water-dependent creatures. We've spoken a bit about this before, about the fact that the dams in this area that were built entirely, with well-meaning intentions, provide the animals with water. That, of course, brought a whole number of species up into this area that might not otherwise be here. Buffalo, to a large extent, and hippo would be another big one. Hippos would have been very unusual for almost all of the year round in a time before the water holes were constructed. And you might find that the same applies to waterbuck, that they were drawn into this area by the presence of permanent pumped water holes. But they might, if you went back far enough, before people started the farms and before people started managing an area, if you went back far enough back, you'd probably find that you wouldn't really see waterbuck all that often in this area, except at the very height of a good rainy season. So there is an interesting impact. And just by the way, this little one is probably mom's previous offspring, because once the waterbuck reach about 6 months or so of age, they're big enough and strong enough to keep up with moms, and they stop hiding away. Hello, little guy, little girl, sorry. We would see horns if it were a male. Now, Stephanie, very, very good question. This is something I've been looking into or doing a bit more research than my sort of standard understanding of antelope horns. Stephanie wants to know, what do female waterbuck do for defense if they don't have horns? They can kick. She's definitely pregnant. They can definitely kick. They definitely are capable of doing that. However, for the most part, they aren't really capable of defending themselves. And what they'll do is they'll rely on racing away and their innate agility in ducking and diving through dense vegetation. So that is the idea. And the correlation between antelope families or antelope species where the female has horns and the habitat in which they live is very, very strong. So in most species of antelope where the female have horns, wildebeest, for example, sable, roan, eland, those sorts of animals, a lot of the gazelles, the females will have horns as well. There's this very strong correlation between them having horns, the females having horns, and living in an open habitat. As soon as you start living in a dense habitat, you find that the horns are more of a hindrance than a help, because when you're trying to run away through dense vegetation, your horns are going to get stuck and hook you, and all in all just make your life a bit more difficult. It makes sense for the males to keep them because they've still got to compete for females, but for the females, they don't need them. They'd be more of a hindrance than a help. And just an interesting thing, 43 out of 75 species of African antelope, the female have horns. So that is over half of the different antelope species in Africa. There's less for correlation here, but in Africa, over half of them, the females have horns. Right, well, since our waterbuck seems to be quite relaxed and there's no sign of the female going into labor, I think we should head over to James to find out where he is and what he's up to.
I'm trying desperately to find out. There seems to be a black flycatcher, I think, in that tree just to the right, Dave. There, in the middle of that dead thing there. Down a bit. It's just disappeared. Now, up a bit. There. It's disappeared into where that sort of piece comes off to the left. I think it was a black flycatcher. And it was being trailed by a fork-tailed drongo, which, if you're a birder, you might be tempted to say to me, it's absolute nonsense, it must be two fork-tailed drongos. But something has gone into a hole there. I'm just going to quickly check. Where the flycatcher nests. Anyway, he wasn't very, very unconfiding. He wouldn't sit still for any length of time. You see, the drongo doesn't nest in a hole at all. The drongo nests in a cup, a woven cup. Let me just quickly see if I can't find the black flycatcher. Unfortunately, the way this thing is arranged makes it very difficult. There are some more flycatchers, none of them the correct one. Alright, let's carry on. I can't find him exactly. Marvellous. Okay, on we go. We're at Treehouse Dam now. Hello, David. A very good question. You say, did I find out anything about the dragon egg that I found yesterday? The dragon egg we found yesterday, everybody, was a piece of rock that, well, it was unusual in that it was completely layered, and I got a number of very interesting answers to what people thought it was on the Twitterverse, and I think the consensus is that it's some kind of shale or mud rock that was laid down, a sedimentary rock laid down many, many years ago. But where it came from, I think, is quite interesting, simply because, well, it only occurred where there had been great holes dug in the ground, and I think actually it had been retrieved from a quarry somewhere nearby. That's all I found out about it, I'm afraid. Seemed to be quite a lot of iron in it, from what other people said, but yeah. It struck me as being so strange that it definitely wasn't sort of local. There's not a great deal in the way of mammal life so far, so what I think we'll do is do a little bit of a sneak around here for the next few minutes, and then we're going to go and check if there isn't something on Arethusa. Hello, Jamie. Wondering if we find reptiles on safari, and what are my thoughts on them? Well, Jamie, much as I'm sure if I was to say to you, what are your thoughts on human beings, you would say very much, it depends on the human being. Yes, we do find reptiles here. My thoughts on the black mamba are very different from my thoughts on the giant plated lizard, for example. The giant plated lizard is a very peaceable person who lives in a termite mound, basking in the sun, eating the odd termite, possibly the odd grasshopper. The black mamba, of course, one of the world's most venomous snakes, deeply terrifying creature. So my thoughts on him are very different from those of my thoughts on the giant plated lizard. But we get various lizard kinds, 9 species of skink, 2 species of very large monitor lizard. We get probably about 30 or 40 different species of snakes out here, crocodiles every so often, and they're of course very terrifying as well. So lots of different reptiles, most of them very fascinating indeed. Thank you, Jamie. Are you perhaps a new viewer? If you are, it's very nice of you to tell us, or to contact us, but it'd be lovely to know where you're from. So if you wouldn't mind telling us, that'd be great. Oh, there's another redback shrike, David. I think it's another female. No, it's a male. Our cup runneth over. It's disappeared, obviously. Have you got him? He was in that bush, but he's gone. I'm starting to forget what an elephant looks like as well. Let's go along here. There is something I wanted to tell you all about. I'm going to have to drive into this drainage line to do it. I was walking along here the other day. You can't see it. Hang on. We might have to do it from the other side. I found a honey badger's burrow, And we've seen honey badgers here before, and the burrow was very clearly, fairly recently used. You can actually just see it there, Dave. Dave, there's a termite mound through there. That's it, straight through to the left, yeah. Now, just keep it there. I'm going to move forward slightly. There. Can you see the hole? There, right through the top gap there. There, that's the one. That is where they live. The last time I saw a honey badger here was more than a year ago. A female and a little baby. But you can see from the activity down below the hole that it is still used, and used quite regularly. So I think it's a good idea that when we come past here, we must keep an eye out for honey badgers. God. I haven't seen a honey badger here for a long time, but they're interesting that they are moving around there. Right, out on foot with his, well, hopefully socked feet and unsmelly boots, Brent Leo Smith is around scouring the landscape. It's good to have him back on foot. Let's go and find out what he's going to show you today.
Morning and welcome to the African Bush on Foot, and we are of course 100% live. My name is Brent Leo Smith. I have the tall, gangly, majorly carved Jean-Andre Harding on camera, and of course we've got Herbie with us, who's running around keeping us safe while I try find all sorts of fascinating things. Now, we've just walked out of camp. We're on quarantine clearings. Don't worry, quarantine. We're not going to quarantine ourselves or any animals. It's an area back in the 40s and 50s when they were attempting thorns, Jean-Andre. You will not want to walk into that. Well, we're going to walk into that. There we go, Jean-Andre putting his calves at risk. And where they used to quarantine cattle. Now, cattle farming in this area was not a good idea. So basically there used to be tsetse flies here, and then it was sprayed with DDT, very bad, but no one knew that at that time. So once the tsetse flies removed, and the risk of sleeping sickness with all the animals was gone, they tried to cattle farm. But I think of the first 800 cattle brought into this area, nearly 500 were eaten by lions. They got a lot of free meals. So this is an area when they brought cattle into this area initially, there would have been a big fence around here, and the cattle were quarantined here before they left or when they arrived. So that's why a lot of the smaller shrub and bush has been removed, and it has stayed open because the animals have kept feeding on the short grass here. So a bit of history of the Sabi Sands. Now, the original cattle company in this area was called the Toulon Cattle Company. It was owned by a company called Consolidated Sugar. Now, in those days, they were one of the biggest farming operations in Africa. They were based out of KwaZulu-Natal, which is on the Indian Ocean coast, and the majority of what they farmed, their biggest farms, were of course sugarcane. And they obviously tried to branch out into lots of different things. So after the major failed attempt of farming cattle in this section of the Lowveld due to the high population of kitty cats that eat cows, the farms were broken up and sold out to private individuals. Consolidated Sugar managed to hold on to quite a lot of it, and what this area became was a private hunting ground for their executives, and then also for the different individuals that bought smaller sections. And believe it or not, no one came here during the summer when it's beautiful and green. They only came in the winter because of malaria and the heat and the rain. And how people used to get there is there's a train line called the Salati line that runs to the south of us, and it comes all the way from the Drakensberg Mountains through Leidenburg, following the same route that the ox wagons used to take, and down onto the Lowveld. Now, I've seen some incredible photos from those original families who used to come down here for the winter months, for the hunting season, come down with all their stuff on the train, and then their local staff used to meet them with donkey carts. Off the train line, there's a place called Siding 61, which is inside the Sabi Sands, and that was the stop-off point for most of those families. And then from there, it could actually even take you 3 days to get to your farm, especially if the donkey cart got stuck in the sand river. So it was a really big adventure, and they used to come for sort of 3 months or 4 months at a time, and sometimes they wouldn't come for years and years and years. And now a lot of the incredible trackers and staff that local staff that work in the Sabi Sands were often connected to those very old families and were working as hunting trackers, and that, well, their ancestors were in this area. So there's an incredible amount of history, both good and bad, that has happened within the Sabi Sands. Now, it's a very interesting thing that a lot of people, there's a termite mound behind you, Jean-Andre, a lot of people think were good. So everyone used to like to put up fences. Now, keep all your animals in. So there's this massive misconception that fencing is going to keep your animals in. Now, 99% of most animals, if they really want to get out of a fence, it's not going to make a difference. So eventually the landowners in the Sabi Sands agreed not to fence between themselves, but there was still a fence along the Kruger boundary, and that only dropped in 1992, and it was amazing. The influx of animals. You actually get more animals by letting animals roam free. You might not have all the animals all the time, but over a year or 2 years, and if you look at the bigger picture, 10 years, your animal densities are going to be much higher if you are in an open system, and if they utilize different parts of that system throughout the year. Now, for example, I think when the fence opened with the Kruger in 1992, there were 9 elephant in the Sabi Sands Game Reserve. That's crazy to think. 9 elephant, just 9. Now, they're between 1,000 and 1,500, and of course, that number might fluctuate down to as low as 600, especially during the summer months now. As you can see, we haven't seen elephants in a while, and they've all moved out and spread out with the rains, but it's good for the bush. So they utilize an area heavily during the dry season where there's permanent water. As soon as it rains, the natural pans fill up, they spread out, give these areas a chance to recover. Now, it's amazing how our understanding as human beings has changed in such a short time, 50 years. From fences and shooting to photographic and open systems. So we're very, very lucky. Remember, hashtag SafariLIVE on Twitter or questions@wildearth.tv if you'd like to ask us any questions. Now, I'm going to try find probably the old original homestead that was on Djuma. And it was very small, probably a little mud hut where the original cattle farmer would have to sit or stay. And if I found the ruins of the homestead before, they're on quarantine, just sort of behind Ingers, and you can see. And it would have been a really, really tough life for a cattle rancher back in those days, just to get food, everything down here. Hi, Aaron, who's in Florida. Aaron says, oh, I've seen a small little shack when you're driving around. Well, there's actually 2 that we see. There's one on Arethusa, and there's one on Philemon's Cutline. Those are boreholes. So the reason they're in a shack is to stop the elephants pulling out the water pipes. So that's where they're mostly at low-lying areas, inside drainage lines, and that's where we get our water that we have in our taps here for showering and washing clothes and whatnot. So even though we're in the driest section of the Sabi Sands, or the northern Sabi Sands, because we're up quite high away from the Sand and Sabi River, there is still an incredible amount of underground water. And for example, even though we've just had this massive drought, obviously as soon as the droughts come about, we worry extensively about whether our boreholes are going to survive. And it depends. Boreholes in South Africa can be anything from 10 meters to 150 meters depending on where you are. In this area, they average about 20 meters. Now, our borehole here on Philemon's Dip we're quite lucky. It's quite a shallow one. It's 7 meters or 8 meters. But everyone got a bit worried last year after the drought, so they wanted to check how much water was there. So drop down the 8 meters, and that's where your pipe sits. Then they drop a string with a lead down the pipe, and it turns out we still had another 60 or 70 meters of water left. Julia, a borehole is basically, if we wanted to, where's a quarry bush? Okay, anyway, if we wanted to go water divining with our stick, and we found water, it's a machine, that's a corkscrew machine that bores with inside a pipe, and as it bores down, you drop the pipe till it gets into the water, and then that pipe is held up generally at the surface by a piece of concrete, and then you will place your water pump, depending on what type of water pump. If you've got a submersible pump, it'll actually go down the pipe there, or they'll have a pipe that sits on top. So a borehole is the hole you bore to get water out of the ground. Okay, so we've arrived at the sort of original homestead here, and you can see there's a bit of high ground. I'm just going to try see if I can show you. Okay, it's going to be a bit difficult. You're going to have to use your imagination because there's not much left here. Okay, now if you can see there, Jandre, there's a bit of raised ground that runs all the way from the road up towards us. Now, this would have been more than likely the main entrance towards the house. Now, the house would have been right amongst the cattle. Can you imagine the flies that 400 cows around you would have? And it's always amazing. So I've done quite a lot of archaeological work as a hobby, and I've been lucky enough to travel with some incredible archaeologists. Now, you've got to sort of close your mind and think. So it's a bit easier here because it's a little bit more recent. So we're actually standing where the old house was. Now if we come have a look here, you can see bits of old brick, bits of old steel that hasn't been able to be removed. So it actually looks like there were 1, 2, 3 sort of little round rondavels, and then the cattle would have been kept around here because those cattle, and in a lot of cultures as today, cattle are still represent wealth. So if I was the cattle farmer, I'd want to be right here in case the lions were coming. So you generally find that the cows would have been interned very close to him, and there we got an old fire pit. You can actually see the fire pit. You can see the coloration change in the soil. Now, it's always interesting to dig around these parts, although most of this stuff was broken down and removed. But I mean, isn't this incredible? You can see the coloration in the soil here, and it's much lighter. You can see the dip, and this is almost certainly from ash. So many a campfire here. Let's see, yeah, so, and also one of the other things now, if you want to go even further back than the cattle farming section in the Sabi Sands, this area is not a great area where people would have lived permanently. They would have utilized it during the summer months, and the best place to look is always around the big brown ivory trees. So people would have left their villages, which would normally been much closer to the Sand River, to go harvest brown ivory fruit, and you can make a mean and potent alcoholic beverage out of it. It's also quite easy to preserve. So people would have moved up into this area to harvest brown ivory, marula, honey, and all sorts of different things. But you probably wouldn't have found permanent habitation up here because it's quite far from permanent water. Well, anyway, history lesson over. We're going to continue on, see if we can find some animals next. While we do that, let's go see what Mr. Hendry's up to.
I must confess, I think that sounds rather fascinating, Brent's little quarantine discussion. Anyway, I shall have to ask him about it when we get home over the bacon and eggs that will no doubt ensue at 8 a.m. That is a vulture. It is a white-backed vulture. It is 2 white-backed vultures. And I thought for a second that we'd caught them in flagrante delicto, as they say, which is my very, very favourite English saying in the world. It's more Latin than it is English, but you should give it a try. In flagrante delicto. Anyway, but they were not. Indeed, they seem to be perhaps post-coitally cuddling, and they've definitely got a nest there, and they're a couple, and they're hopefully going to raise another beautiful little white-backed vulture chick. It's not often that we described vultures as being beautiful, of course, but They are so important to this ecosystem, and unfortunately their numbers have taken a real dive over the last little while. And so I hope that those two in that scraggly nest of theirs, which looks about as comfortable as that hardy-dar nest, I hope that they will be raising a little chick very soon. And what they're looking around, hoping to do very soon now, is to take to the air as the heat comes. And it's not hot yet, but I can feel that deeply heated, baking December sun starting to work its way through the cloud here. And soon, as soon as the cloud breaks, what will happen is the thermals will start to rise off the air, and when that happens, the vultures will take off. Oh, look, they've got a chick. Look at that. Isn't there a little one in there? No. Oh, David. Don't mind us. I thought maybe there was a chick in there. Either they're modifying the nest or there is a little thing in there. It looks almost like they're eating something, but they definitely are not eating something in their own nest, unless it's to clear it out. Now, of course, these are one of 5 vulture species that we get here. I'm just going to check when they breed, because I thought that vultures, in fact, I'm pretty sure, we had a fairly long discussion about the fact that vultures are largely winter breeders. I don't think that they're summer breeders. They might just be doing some housekeeping. And we discussed why that should be the case, and decided that it was probably the case largely because in winter many things die of starvation, and was particularly this last winter, and that means that there's plenty to eat for a scavenger in the wintertime. Right, 3 eggs sometimes, normally 1, almost invariably so. Incubation, yes, but when? When, please, tell me when. Let's just quickly check here. Doesn't say. That's very interesting. I will do a little bit more checking up on this, but I don't think that they are commonly summer breeders at all. Very interesting. Anyway, there they are. White-backed vultures. Maybe have a chick in there, maybe not. Leopold's apartment. What a lovely Twitter handle. It sounds very sort of literary. Leopold's apartment. I imagine it to be a very literary place, full of books. I don't know why I would have thought that. Leopold's apartment, you want to know why it is that the vulture numbers have taken a dive? Well, they've taken a dive, we think, for 2 main reasons. One of them possibly more important than the other. And that is that they have been used increasingly for traditional medicine. Now, even in an area like we live, where there are so many very poor people, people will do just about anything to make a bit of a living for their families. There's some impala over there. David, I've parked you on a lovely slope here, haven't I? And what that means is that people will try, well, I mean, like I say, they will try and kill as much as they can in order to make a little bit of money. And what the vultures do is they provide a source of income because they are believed to be such powerful magic in some of these areas. So what happens is that a carcass will be poisoned, the vultures will then go and eat that carcass, and I mean, you know, if 40 vultures land on a dying cow or dead cow that's been poisoned, all 40 will die. And that, we think, is why the vultures have taken such a dive in the last 10 or 15 years. It's largely for use in traditional medicines. And the sort of magic that they are believed to possess is that they can see into the future. Anyway, there are a lot of people doing a lot of very good work stopping those trends, and so hopefully those numbers will recover. The other reason, I think, is that there are also a large number of what we call vulture restaurants, which are basically tourist traps closer to the mountains. And that's not necessarily bad for vulture numbers. It just means that vultures are not necessarily coming over this way all the time. They can, get ready-made meals quite close to the mountains, and so that's what's going on there. But just anecdotally, I remember when I started guiding in 2000 or so, if something looked like it was going to die, a plethora of vultures would arrive and wait for it to pop off its clogs, and then they'd come down and devour it. I mean, we had an elephant carcass once or twice, and within hours there were vultures wheeling and then descending, and there were sometimes hundreds of the carcass at a time. And that just doesn't happen here. I mean, it's often 10 or 12, more often sort of 5 or 6. Every lion kill that we ever had, hundreds of vultures. And they're so important to the ecosystem. Right. Oh, beautiful picture of 2 impala buttocks. Okay, right, we're going to continue towards Arathusa Pan, see if there isn't perhaps a cat sitting over there. Jamie is a cheetah plains. So let's go and find out what she's found there.
And all the way across from our western fringes right through to our eastern boundary, Brian and myself have happily arrived on Cheetah Plains, and so far we've seen one impala. It ran away. No, it was one impala and one baby impala. They both ran away. We've checked out Cheetah... Sorry, everybody. We've checked out Cheetah Plains Pan, and now, since we had that moment with those waterbuck ladies and we were having a long conversation about horns, just spotted a waterbuck bull. Looks like he might be quite a magnificent gentleman. And let me see if I can find him again. There he is. He's gone stock still and quite well hidden. We have arrived on Cheetah Plains while we take our time to get to this waterbuck bull. We've arrived at Cheetah Plains. We've checked out 3 in a row pan. I was hoping that Quarantine might decide to start wandering across in our direction. He is at the moment on Nkoro, which is the property to the north of our Traverse area. He's on Nkoro, and apparently at the moment very flat, unfortunately. So he is around. Hopefully he decides to start walking in our direction. I'm just listening. Sorry, everybody. I'm just listening to the updates. It sounds as though Quarantine is not as far into Cheetah Plains, as into Nkoro as I thought. Sorry, just bear with me one moment. I just have to listen to this. Okay. Cool. Alright, so our magnificent waterbuck bull is observing us, and there you can see, unlike the females, a very fine head of horns that curve upward away from the top of his head. Beautifully ridged. There's what we were talking about before, about the fact that those horns are solid bone with their keratin ridges that move all the way up along it. And those just help to add help to add a little bit of traction when it comes to fighting. And again, sorry, struggling with your name, so please don't be insulted if I get this wrong. I hope you have S. Sorry. I think it's Fennec Gamer, but it might also be Scenic Gamer. That's even funnier. Fennec or Scenic Gamer. I think it's Fennec. Fennec for Fox. There we go. Kirsty goes, is Fennec with an S? Was that an F or an S, Kirst? Fennec Gamer. You want to know if they are bone. Are they called horns in the same way that rhino have horns? That is a very, very valid point. We do refer to rhino horns, and they, of course, are not bone at all. They are essentially, I mean, obviously with some very fundamental differences, but they're essentially basically your fingernails, or the same substance as your fingernails or your hair. In the case of rhino horn, there is no bone at all. So that's a good point. I'm not quite sure about why there is that linguistic distinction between rhino horn and antelope horn. Rhino horn, I think it might be to do with the type of growth plate that the horns grow from. And the structure of the growth plate. I think that might be one of the explanations behind why rhino horn is still called a horn, even though it's not solid bone. But none of our animals out here have antlers. What do you think of that, Waterbuck? Making sure your nostrils are thoroughly clean. Yes. Very clean nostrils, this Waterbuck has. So he has horns. Giraffe have ossicones, and ossicones are bone, but the reason they're called ossicones, so that sort of reinforces my growth plate theory, the reason that they are called ossicones is because the giraffe is born with them. Admittedly, they are quite softened, and it's mainly cartilage, but a baby giraffe is born with its horns, in inverted commas, on the top of its head. They just happen to lie flat, and then they stand up as the giraffe gets older, whereas antelope and rhino are born without their horns, and those will start to grow as they reach a couple of months old. And I always feel slightly, particularly not so much for antelope mothers because their babies are weaned quite early, but for the poor rhino mothers that continue to suckle their babies for months and months up to a year. Bye-bye, mister. Trot, 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 trot. That continue to suckle their babies for almost a year. Those of you who perhaps have seen cows suckling, you know that cats do this and dogs do this, but rhino do, better not do that with my microphone, but they headbutt their moms in order to stimulate the milk production, and by the time they're sort of 6-8 months old, they've got good little horn that then is jabbing into poor mom's lower abdomen. I always feel so terribly sorry for them. And then, of course, the other form of weaponry, if you could call it that, is tusks. But tusks are something completely different. They are modified teeth rather than some kind of growth of bone or horn. And there you go. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've forgotten in that sense. No. That sums up the mammal arsenal, I suppose, if we could refer to it in that way. I just want to get hold of Andrew quickly, so bear with me one moment. Andrew. Sorry, you're the only person that I can copy it this morning. What was that update around Kalkul Jacobin? Copy that. Thanks very much, Andrew. Sorry, everybody. Copy that. Thank you. Will you please keep me updated? Cool. Andrew's being a hero this morning. Oh, goodness. now that that conversation's over. Andrew's being our hero this morning because I can hear him clearly on the radio. He's going to let us know. It seems as though quarantine is moving south, so he is moving in our direction, and Andrew's going to give us a shout when it's time to go, and hopefully he keeps going. He doesn't decide to lie down again. So let me carry on listening to the Game Drive channel so that I can hear what exactly is happening. Let's head over to Brent in the meantime on foot on Djuma.
Now, we're moving slowly up the edge of a little dry riverbed, seeing what we can find. Now, a lot of you will have seen all the trees that have been pushed over by the elephants and think, oh, elephant damage. But it's not elephant damage. It's actually quite important, especially after a drought. A lot of these dead trees are, like this dead ziziphus here, are providing a safe spot for the grass. So there we go. You can see the grass underneath here is protected to a degree from impala and from wildebeest and zebra and even rhino, although rhino will sometimes move this. The elephants do move it from time to time to try get into the grass, but it's a really important thing. Not only that, is that the dead wood provides food for termites and lots of other creatures which add nutrients back into the soil. So when I see stuff pushed over by an elephant, I don't see elephant damage, I see elephant activity. Now, elephants are keystone species, and they are one of the only species that is able to change their surrounds. Now, Mary's wondering, with all the dry bush, are we not in danger of wildfires? Well, Mary, not really. I mean, if we look here, fires, not flowers. Sorry, Mary. If we look here, it's not really trees that are going to burn. Trees need other stuff to burn first. There's no grass to burn, and the grass that is here is all green. I mean, you could probably even start a big fire of wood here, and it wouldn't spread beyond once the wood's finished. You need, as soon as you've got lots of grass to burn, then wildfires are a danger. Behind you, Jandre. Beautiful. There's a pair of African hawk eagles in the tree, and you got them. There we go. Morning, hawk eagles. Oh, they are such absolutely gorgeous eagles. They are incredible hunters. One of their favorite things to hunt is other birds, particularly francolin, guinea fowl, and they use quite interesting strategies. So generally one will fly quite high where the birds can see it, and they'll often look up and alarm, and the other one will come in low and strike. Now the clouds are clearing up and the heat of the day is starting. The flies are coming out, but that's okay. As much as we don't like the flies, they do serve their purpose out here in the bush. Now this is quite an interesting little drainage system. Now the reason I say that is because it's relatively young. Now a lot of people, when they see erosion like this, they think it's man-made. This is not man-made. When you find erosion, particularly like this, and on a quite an open system like this, there are no really old trees here. The oldest tree is a couple of 100 years old maybe. Now when you see, let's try, I think we're going to be able to show this. I'm going to jump in and show you here that how the water is coming off the hill before it gets down into the drainage. It's breaking it up. Now let me get in here. And where water cuts through like this, it's generally, let me find, there we go, a little comfortable seat down here. So where you find these fissures, which are the beginnings of rivers. Now here we've got some quite interesting stuff. This is a type of shale, so quite red shale, quite soft. We can break it up quite easily. And if we look carefully, there's also quartz inside here. So this is the boundary between two soil lines. So water always takes the path of least resistance. So this is the tiny little line between two different types of soil, and that's where the water is going to cut through. Now, by putting roads and in bad places and having bad grazing practices and farming and stuff, you can cause a different type of erosion, which is called sort of sheet erosion, and that is from piece of a baby giant land snail. But this is very old. It's so thin. The sun has really made it almost translucent, and it breaks very easily. That's probably been dead for many a year. Sorry, back to the soil types. Now, you can sort of force this type of erosion by putting roads and things in bad places, but in this type of situation, it's completely natural. And already starting now, you can see the good side and the bad side. So say good and bad. So you have better soil types and worse soil types. Now if we look at the types of trees that are growing on either side of this little ravine, here we've got some young Timbuti trees, hardwood trees, good root systems, sort of grip the bank together. On the other side, we've got guarri bushes. So that side's the side that's more than likely going to disappear even more. And I mean, we can really see the quartz on this side. So, lion. That's quite close. Contact calling. I suppose we better go have a look. But so you can really see the quartz on this side, and then the shale that really breaks up on the other side. So it's really fascinating when you just stop to look a little bit closer at these type of things. And one of the most important things that a lot of people don't realize is that the most important thing out in the bush, or out anywhere, where if you're a farmer, is soil. So everyone thinks, sorry, I'm just trying to save Jean-André's calves. Everyone thinks, oh, you must have lots of grass for lots of animals, and etc., etc. Now, you can kill an animal in a field of grass if it's the wrong type of grass, if it's a sour felt grass. So the most important thing is where you have good soils, you have good grass. Where you have good grass, you have good grazers. And numbers of grazers. When you have lots of grazers, you've got lots of predators. So it all starts in the soil. Put it back in its hole, and we're going to continue on. James says, can we keep an eye out for butterflies? We definitely can, but we're also going to keep an eye out for all sorts of little hopping creatures. Now, I think it's time for the nearly impossible tree quiz. Here we go. This is a very small little tree. Oh, there we go. Quite a big spider. Chandra, come around this side. Can't go that side. He's there. On the back side of this leaf. And the jumping spider there. I'm going to go past. Oopsie, so there we go. Looks like one of the family of jumping spiders. I'm not going to touch in case, maybe not actually. Let me just try and see. Can you see the hairs on his legs? It could be maybe a wolf spider. When I initially saw a jumping spider, the body shape's wrong. Now, there are lots of spider species. They can all spin silk, but they hunt by running around. Now, as I said, this is the nearly impossible tree quiz with a spider. Now this, I think, might catch some people. And this one has been fed on. It's very, very young. But there is a little hint that I'm going to give you. It's also where we're walking on the edge of a river system. But when I plucked one of those tiny little leaves, look at that. There's your hint. I'm not even going to say any more. So if you know what tree this could be, use the hashtag SafariLive on Twitter, or send us an email, questions@wildearth.tv. Now, I'm trying to think. That lion sounded like it was down towards the southeast. I think it could be off our property, to be honest. Around Gowrie Main, Cheetah Cut Line. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to carry on walking. I'm going to call Jamie on the radio and see if maybe she, on her way back from Cheetah Plains, might see any sign of that lion that was calling. So let's go see what she's up to down in the east.
I've definitely seen one or two signs of lions, as Brent has asked me to keep an eye out for them. One of them has definitely crossed south, to the south of our boundary, but I will check on my way back because, of course, on a nice cool morning like this morning, which is slowly but surely heating up, they are still moving about, much in the same way that Mr. Q is continuing his slow but steady saunter towards Cheetah Plains. I'm still listening carefully to the Game Drive radio to see whether or not he has crossed yet. Doesn't seem that way. But while we wait for him to do that, we'll keep looking out for signs of lions. I've seen some tracks on Cheetah Plains. They're a bit old though. They're probably from 2 or so days ago. Sorry. Still listening to updates on quarantine. It sounds like he's getting there. He's getting there, but he's lying down again. I have to try and call him gently over the boundary. We won't, of course, but it would be very convenient if he decided to just extra few meters. Liz would like a full update on our feline characters, if we have any updates on all of them. Okay, let's start with the Nkuhumas. I tried to find out whether or not there were 6 cubs seen with the Nkuhumas yesterday. They were on Simbambili, so to the top northwest of our boundary. I didn't manage to have any success. Everybody that I found didn't seem to know, they hadn't been there. So we'll keep trying to find out for you. Hopefully the Nkuhumas are going to return back onto Djuma again. I'm relatively confident that all 6 cubs will be together once again with the rest of the pride. Okay. Sorry. Copy that. Thanks, Andrew. Can I grab a standby? Copy that. Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. All right. The slow and steady saunter south continues. Liz, my apologies. I was in the process of giving you an update. Obviously, quarantine is right on the boundary now between Nkoro and Cheetah Plains. We are on standby 3 because apparently you can see him from the boundary. If he crosses into Cheetah Plains, we'll be jumped ahead of the queue because we can drive on Cheetah Plains. Some of the other vehicles that are waiting to see him can't. So you can understand we're trying to rush the people who won't be able to follow him into Cheetah Plains, trying to rush them through first before he does decide to come out, to move outside of their traverse area. Cat characters. Karula was south. Hosanna obviously was seen with Brent yesterday, but we know that Shongile was in the area just to the south of our boundary as well. So the royal family is together once again. As far as I know, Nkanyeni was around Nkoro with quarantine yesterday. She's not with him this morning, so I'm not sure where she is. Tundi was on Torchwood without her cub, but that's just because she was probably just hunting for the cub. And those, I think, are the only cubs, or the only updates that I have for our cat characters. All right, let us bounce all the way back across to Djuma and see what James is up to.
We're on Arathusa, everybody, and the Nyalas are just heading into a thicket now. It's a little herd with one fairly big adult female and a couple of little ones. And they're being trailed by two little birds on the ground. I think they are close to my favourite birds just because they look ridiculous. I mean, that helmet, how can it possibly have a purpose out here? And at the same time, they're so very attractive. I was just saying to David how suddenly it's got hot. It's now 6:30 in the morning. Suddenly it's got extremely warm indeed. The cloud has moved off. The sun is going to start baking the land, and those vultures that we saw earlier are going to take to the sky fairly soon. All right, let's carry on. We're going to head a little bit further west into Arathusa and see if we don't come up with some kind of leopard track, maybe an indication as to where the Anderson male has gone, perhaps Tingana. But very exciting that quarantine seems to be around Cheetah Plains. There we have the guinea fowl. This is the helmeted guinea fowl. There are two species of guinea fowl in the world. The other one is the crested guinea fowl, which, well, it's a totally ridiculous looking bird. Imagine that thing with a sort of, I suppose you might describe it as a wig from Tina Turner in the 1980s. That's what they look like. A blackened wig from Tina Turner. Lovely feathers, especially that blue colour to the head at this time of the day. And you know, the light has gone from gold to burnt out white in the last literally 10 minutes only. Well, the guinea fowl will be looking for seeds to eat, the old insects on the ground. Kerry, you say you love watching birds walk because they always look silly when they walk. I have to agree with you. I know exactly what you mean. I'm not sure how else to describe it. I think that's a really good way of describing it. They do look a little bit silly, but you know, I mean, as I've said before, the guinea fowl is quite a remarkable physical specimen. It's not only that they're able to fly, they're able to run very well as well. And they run, although they look silly when they walk, I know exactly what you mean, they can run extremely fast. And they fly pretty well too. Anyway, let's leave them and let's carry on round here. There's a waterbuck. Ooh, high action here on Arathusa. Couple of waterbuck here. Now, Jamie, I believe, described them as smelling like off Oros. In other words, rotting
like literally I was looking at something else and this jumped onto my stick. Now that doesn't happen every day, so I'm going to try get a frontal view for you. How's that, Chandra? We can see how he's perfectly designed to match bark and other things. Now all the sort of bladder hoppers, they have this heavily developed abdomen and tiny wings that are completely not usable anymore. Isn't that very cool? Shame, let's put him back down on the ground. Now the reason we found him is because we spotted something much easier to see. Hop, little hopper, hop, I want my stick back. He's like, no, I look like this stick, I'm not getting off. Come on. Okay, there we go. So as I walked through here and we came through this little dip, we noticed immediately some white stuff sticking out. Now look at that, there's one egg there and another egg there. Now I'm pretty certain these are Natal Franklin eggs, and on closer inspection we found where the nest was. And here we go. I just wanted to stand on Mr. Grasshopper. So that's where the nest was. Now that is a very typical Franklin nest, just a little bit of leaf and stick in a sort of hidden section. So that's a very typical Natal Franklin nest. And what's happened, I mean, we can only guess. The most likely thing is that the mother's been killed, possibly by those hawk eagles we saw just now, possibly by something else, a snake. And we've had some incredible winds that could have blown the eggs out of the nest, but that one over there makes me think not. I think it's possible that dwarf mongoose might have tried to feed off these eggs, but they're proving a little bit too strong to get into. So what we are going to do is I'm going to collect these eggs, and they can, let's see, the next time if James is in the tent, if he can build a Franklin nest, see if he can emulate one. So I'll just keep those in my hand for now. I'll pass them on to Herbie. Now the last thing we saw, and that's the incredible thing, so these eggs led us to the grasshopper, which then led us to a tiny little creature. Now this looks more than likely to be a crinum that hasn't flowering, so one of the lilies. And if we look at this side here first, you can see something's been eating the outside of the crinum, just eating the top layer of cellulose. And then when we looked a little bit more carefully, I'm just trying to make sure my shadow is not in the way. I'm going to try to get this guy into the light. How's that, Chandra? No? There? Look at that. I have no idea what butterfly or moth that little caterpillar belongs to, but he's got all those hairs to protect him. And if he's eating a crinum lily, he's probably going to be quite noxious as an adult. So maybe a butterfly, maybe a very brightly colored butterfly. I'm going to have to try search through my books when I get home to see what possibly has a little larval stage looking like that. So that is the cool thing about bushwalk. One thing can lead to another, can lead to another, can lead to another. And well, we're going to keep moving through this area, seeing what other fantastic things we can find. While we do that, Jamie is with one of my favorite antelopes, the Gnomless wildebeests.
And what a lovely sight there is on Mala Mala this morning. Moving from one wonderful thing to another, as Brent said. We've got our herd of wildebeest, and they're gorgeous little ones. And unfortunately, we actually can't spend too much time with them here. We've got to go racing off because we've just been called into the quarantine sighting. But I had to show you my favorite baby antelope in the form of 1, 2, 3, 4 tiny little baby golden-coloured wildebeest. The babies have a completely different colour to the adults. Unfortunately, Andrew's just called me right now, and we have to leave them. But luckily, it looks as though they're moving towards Cheetah Plains. So we're right on the boundary of Cheetah Plains and Mala Mala. We now have to go racing off to the boundary of Nkoro and Cheetah Plains. Luckily, it's not a massive distance, but we do have to go now because Andrew is waiting kindly for us to make our way in. Okie dokie. Sorry everybody, I did stay with the wildebeest for quite a while, but unfortunately now we have to make our way all the way back north. A beautiful morning, the clouds have burned off, the sun is actually starting to get hot again, and I'm just trying to calculate what is going to be our quickest route. I think we've got to trundle all the way along the eastern boundary of Cheetah Plains. So whilst we do that, we'll be back with you very shortly with quarantine. But while we do that, let's head over to James and a bird.
This, everybody, is my third nest of the day, and if I say so myself, I think quite a remarkable spot. It's a magpie shrike nest, and you can just see the movement there of the little bird. That's the little chick. And we spotted it because there was an adult sitting on the tree, so we stopped to look at it. And I just heard a strange noise. Meow, meow, meow. And I thought that must be the baby. There's the adult. Thought it had distracted us from the nest, you see. I think that's what they do. They fly away when they think that you may have spotted their nests. He's beautiful, isn't he lovely? Or she. Could be either. They're not sexually dimorphic at all. Keep going, Davy. You're almost there. That's it. That's the one. And there's the little one. Now, I hope you're all remarkably astounded at my skills. Of course, this is my third nest in about 15 years, so I'm quite impressed with myself. I do wish Scott Dyson was watching. He'd be most pleased with my progress as a nest finder. That's so cool. I don't know when it's going to come out, and I thought these were communal nesting birds. And I think they are. I mean, they live in a flock. But where the rest of them are, I don't know. And that black bit at the top there, you see that strange sort of black stripe? I thought that might be a tail, but it hasn't moved in the slightest. So maybe, oh, there it goes, it has moved. Maybe there's just a nursemaid or two around here. And maybe that's what that one is, the adult. Oh, moving around, thinking about fledging, perhaps. There are definitely two birds in there. I think they're slightly too big to be in the nest now. Oh, you know what? That's not a chick. That's an adult incubating eggs. Sorry, everyone. That's why the tail is all bent up and around. There we go. An adult incubating eggs. Mrs. Magpie Shrike, making sure that her eggies don't end up like the ones that Brent's just found. Brilliant stuff. Now that's a young jackalberry tree that's managed to survive a fire about 3 years back. You can see it's fairly blackened around here still. And if we zoom all the way out, you'll see that, well, they've picked a really good spot. It's not easy to... Wouldn't be easy for a predator to spot that nest. But couldn't hide from us, could it, David? Oh, no, no. Not today. Not on Nest Finding Thursday, is it? Yes, Nest Finding Thursday. Good. Right, we're going to continue. We're on the far western boundary of Arathusa now. The sun is blazing down on us. And the light is very bright indeed. We'll go pretty much up to the northern western corner, I think, and just see if we can't find anything there. There's been nothing on the radio. I'm definitely not hearing everything the way I should be. Apparently Brent has got something called a Sanawa now.
Well, we've got a lovely hibiscus here, and inside the hibiscus is a beetle. I can't really identify it too well because I don't want to disturb it. And if you have a look, that beetle is absolutely covered in pollen. So it's not only butterflies and bees that pollinate flowers out here. There's a whole host of different beetles and bugs and flies. And ants that can help with the pollination of flowers. Look at that. You see that little beetle inside there? Now, this is quite a new hibiscus flower. And now I'm hoping for a bit more rain and we'll start seeing some of the less common flowers. Now, hibiscus is one of the more common flowers. We get about 3 different species, and so I'm a bit rusty on which actual hibiscus this is, but I'm sure it'll come to me once I check in my books. So we do get those giant hibiscuses as well, which are also pretty special, but I don't think this is one of the giant hibiscuses, but very cool nonetheless. So it's quite interesting now. As it heats up, I'm going to start showing you some leaves, and they're going to start closing to stop losing water from the pounding African sun. And the nearly impossible tree quiz seems to be proving to be nearly impossible, Christian. Unfortunately, it's not an African maple tree. And just remember that the hints, it generally grows on the edge of dry riverbeds. It has a white milky latex. Those are 2 big hints. Okay, so we're going to keep moving. James, you have cracked the nearly impossible tree quiz. It is indeed a Tambuti tree, and there's a big one up ahead. So we'll go have a quick look at that. Now, we're actually in quite an interesting spot here. We're on an island. Now, we're talking about soil types, and we're actually on an island in between 2 little dry riverbeds, and the biggest difference in soil types is actually on this side. Oh, there's a cave. I didn't know there was a cave here. Well, not a proper cave, but we will go have a look a little later. But see, you can actually see the difference in the color in the soil. You can see there's sort of reddish, slightly reddish soil, darker colored soil on the other side, and we're on the lighter colored soil. So this is the same system we were looking at earlier, where it was tiny, and it's just become bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, strange enough, in those little caves, like, did you have a look at the cave there, Jean-Andre? In those little caves, one of the funniest things I've ever found sleeping in one of those, because it's obviously nice and cool and shady, is a spotted hyena. But Jamie's got something else spotted, and it's on the move.
Spotted and on the move, and luckily just on his way into Cheetah Plains. There was a tragic moment where Ryan called me and told me he was moving north. Luckily, it seems as though he has changed his mind, and there you go. Quarantine, Karula's male offspring. And there we go. Thank you very much to all of the vehicles involved with getting us into the sighting. As you can see, there is a large trench between me and Mr. Q. I'm not quite sure which way he's going to go around it, so it might be that we could lose him. There he goes. Keep going this way, my boy. That's good. That's a good thing. I've hardly had a chance to get to know this particular male, but I'm sure that Brent is jealous. He said yesterday that Quarantine is his favorite male leopard, and one can understand why. He is such a gorgeous boy. I've only had brief sightings with him. Oh, he's sitting down. Hold on, everybody. Right, we will not be crossing that trench. Brian? Can you see him there, or shall I go forward a bit? Oh, look at him having a jolly good head rub. Oh, this amazing young male is actually enormous for his age. He's only just 4, I think. And already he's... What are you doing? Are you having a scratch, or are you scent marking? Because though you're actually having a lovely scratch. He's having a great time with that branch. But he is a big boy for his age, and he's already been seen to challenge his older brother Shimbambalana in terms of establishing territory. He is particularly advanced. Yes, well done, you caught it. You got that branch. And we're up again. There's that gorgeous face. Isn't he beautiful? Now what you doing? We haven't seen him showing signs of territorial marking yet, so he hasn't been scent marking, scraping his feet, or sawing in this area, at least in the times that we've seen him. But there is a very good chance that he is looking to establish himself in this area, which is fascinating behavior for a young male. He seems to have found himself a niche. But already, at such a young age, showing signs of developing that massive neck that is so typical of male leopards. Right, where are you going to go? Yes, keep going that way, boy. Oh, goodness. We're about to hit an impassable watch out there, Bebop. Okay, there's a large stump there. I'm going to hope... No. That was hopeful to the point of foolishness. I was going to hope that we could push past it, but we definitely can't. It's coming right towards an area known as Buff Pan. I've lost him now. Oh, there he is. Oh, you know what he's doing? Oh, no, he's just digging. Oh, no, we're okay for now. Oh, he's still moving. All right, we're going to have to go all the way around, but it's not far. So I think stick with us, because we might end up with a last view of him at some point. So we're not going to be moving far. We just have to go around. Hold on. Watch out, everybody. Are you okay there, Bebop? And who dat you say you always thought quarantine was a place? It is a place. It is the open area outside Djuma, and that is where Quarantine the male leopard gets his name from. When he was a young male, when he was still being looked after by Karula, he spent a large amount of time on quarantine clearings, hence the name Quarantine, the quarantine male. If the benefit of hindsight, I actually think Quarantine might have been a slightly more appropriate name for young Sindile, just because of his history and his background. But Quarantine is named for the place that he spent a lot of time, and that's typical of naming leopards. There we go. Phew. Over the wall of Buff Pan, the newly refurbished Buff Pan, and there we go. We have a beautiful shot of him in a second. Unless he decides to stop, he's going to come out beautifully in front of us. So yes, you're absolutely right. You're not mistaken. Come on, boy. Hello. Quarantine is a place. It's also a leopard. There he is. Now, I just missed out on seeing Quarantine and Kunuma spending a lot of time on Djuma. So they are Karula's cubs, the Queen Karula. They were Karula's cubs. They're now Karula's grown boys. Yeah, he does seem to be scent marking. That's very interesting. Isn't it amazing? We're so lucky that in this case we have a chance to see one of Karula's boys actually establishing himself. Shimbambalana and Quarantine are, as far as I know, the only 2 male offspring of Karula that have actually stuck around in the Traverse area that we can go to. Obviously, with male leopards, they very often disperse. They move far. Thanks very much, Ryan. They often move very far away from their natal ranges, which is why we have been so fortunate with quarantine and with Shimbambalana that we've had a chance, or that many of you have had a chance to see them establish themselves. Kunyuma moved just to the south. He's often seen on Mala Mala. They've given him a new name, but he is still Kunyuma to us. And that is Quarantine's Quarantine's littermate, Quarantine's brother. Which way are we going to go, my boy? This is so cool. I was hoping this morning would bring a Quarantine sighting. He is gorgeous. Oh, Karula produces some really stunning males. Would be ideal if he would stop for a second so that we could see his face, but I'm sure as it starts to get hotter, he's going to slow down. He is very empty-bellied, so he is hungry. You can see that flap of skin between, sort of around his chest and then around the middle of his legs, between his legs. So he is a hungry boy. He is on the hunt. But I think just cruising, sauntering along. Look how big he's got. I so wish that I had had the opportunity to see a Quarantine and Kunyuma moving about. I'm going to reposition so that we can get a nice view of a Quarantine's head, and it is quite dense in here. So while we do that, I'm not entirely sure what James wants to show you, so let us go and find out.
Oh, everybody, these days this is such a rare thing in the world to see, and there is one of our favourites, a hyena. Now, I suspect, given how far west we are, this is a hyena from the Arathusa clan, so not one of our favourites, well, not one of our favourite characters, certainly one of our favourite animals. And I do not blame this hyena one tiny little bit for lying where it is. It is 7:10 in the morning, and already it feels like we are lying in the sun itself. And that hyena has very cleverly found some cooling mud to lie in. Probably a male, lurking away from the rest of the clan. And really has found some glorious mud to snooze in for the day. Just keeping one eye open to have a look at us. Now, in case you're a new viewer and you're wondering, is this a tremendously rare animal? Do we never see them? The answer is, well, no, it's not a rare animal at all. They're common around here. There are lots of them around. We see their tracks a lot. But, you know, we used to spend huge amounts of time with them. Great periods spent at their den sites watching the antics of the little cubs. And our little clan that lived on Juma was a fantastic group. And unfortunately, they skedaddled off to the north, and we haven't seen them for so long that I think this is the first hyena sighting we've had in weeks. And just looked up because a batalier flew overhead. And it has decided that the batalier is not sufficiently interesting to... Oh, well, no, the reason is looking at the batalier. I'm not sure if it can identify a batalier or not, but it'll look at any birds of prey. Of course, is that a hyena will follow vultures towards a carcass. So vultures are wheeling and going down on a dead or dying buffalo, so the hyenas will follow where they're going down. There's obviously a thermal just above us, and there are a few vultures and things sort of scooting overhead. Yeah, it's a batalier actually that keeps flying in front of the sun and leaving a shadow. That's what he's looking at. Any fun? And you can see how huge the nose is, a massive smelling creature, this thing. It's able to smell a huge amount, probably 50 or 60 times as effectively as we can. I'm sorry, we got in a critical area. Normally we wouldn't have come here. We had to. All right, let's go back to Jamie and we'll carry on from here.
perfect timing because we are just about to get a really truly stunning view of Quarantine. He's still very much on the move, and he's looking utterly spectacular in this morning light. Tail twitching, just like his mom, while he's on the hunt, searching for something to feed off. I have, in my drive here, I didn't see any impala herds, but they could be hiding in this thicket. We're not far away from Cheetah Plains Pan, and I'm hoping that he is going to go and have a drink in that open area. From what I've been told, Quarantine has a way of choosing perfect poses. He poses beautifully on termite mounds and trees, and obviously he doesn't do it intentionally, but he does make for some incredibly photogenic situations. His tail twitching away, white-tipped, very clear, very visible compared to the rest of his almost beautifully camouflaged fur. Rest time, perfect. Let's go and move around him so that we can see his face, since this morning is providing us with such beautiful light. And that's what leopards do. It's what all big cats do. They walk for a bit, sit down, have a rest. I don't think he's going to stay long. I think he's going to be up and moving again in a relatively short space of time. So let's take advantage of his stillness for now. Let's squeeze through here. Hello, Q. You gorgeous boy. Isn't he absolutely lovely? Now, because he is a leopard that I am not 100% familiar with, I'm speaking with my voice very low, just to make sure that he's accustomed. I've always heard that Quarantine is very, very comfortable with vehicles. But his brother, Kunuma, had inherited his mom and his aunt's tendency to occasionally rush at vehicles, growl at them, and then lie down again, something that I believe Brian has experienced before. Apparently many of you are taking some stunning screenshots. Please do, because my camera battery's flat, and I would love to be able to share this with you. Young male leopards are always utterly gorgeous. Not that all leopards aren't. Natasha, that's exactly what I was thinking. I didn't say it, but it was exactly what I was thinking. That Mr. Q is the perfect leopard model. And he is. For now, relatively unscarred. He's got 1 or 2 scratches on his nose, probably from fights with his brother. The odd, no tears in his ears. He hasn't got droopy just yet, although his jowls are looking a little bit droopy. He doesn't have the sort of the droopiness to his face in the same way Tingana does. Hello, boy. Now, I'm not quite sure exactly what was happening with Quarantine and Nkanyeni on Nkoro. Nkanyeni has 1 male cub who is over a year old now. In fact, I think he must be close to 14 months. And I imagine that in the not too distant future, Nkanyeni might be coming into estrus. I know that they had a brief scrap. I don't know if it was a scrap or just Nkanyeni was trying to draw Quarantine's attention away from her male cub. But it could be that she's coming back into estrus in the not too distant future. And that would probably, we'll never know for certain, but that would probably be Quarantine's first conquest, his first female. And that's a relatively young age for a male leopard, because they are sexually mature at around 2. They're able to reproduce, but they generally don't have the opportunity to do so. I'm not sure where Shimvambalana is. Perhaps he's occupied further into the Kruger, which is further to the east of us, but not far. I think Shimvambalana probably has a massive territory that extends completely outside of the Sabi Sand, because of course there's no fences between here and the Kruger National Park, so he may well be in there defending his territory elsewhere, and perhaps Q is taking the opportunity. Now, Dark Princess, the perennial question. Your question is whether or not Karula would know that this is her son, were they to cross paths now several years later, or 2 years later. Almost 2 years since he dispersed. Yes, I think she would. I strongly believe that she would. I think that all of the leopards in the area know each other, and they know their mothers, their sons. As to how they would react to each other, that's a different story. The fact that they know that they're related and that they're mother and son isn't necessarily going to inspire close family feelings. And it's quite common to see females with new cubs and their previous generation, so their previous offspring, sharing a kill together, for example, or patiently tolerating each other's company. That happens regularly with leopards before the older offspring disperse and move off. But now Quarantine has dispersed and moved off. It's impossible to predict how he would react. Leopards are notoriously difficult. They do odd things. I could say to you that he would respond aggressively to, maybe not aggressively to Karula, but he could potentially behave aggressively towards her cubs because he's a male and that's what his instinct tells him to do. He would also potentially mate with his mom if she were an estrus and he happened to encounter her. And they're not governed by human rules, and inbreeding is common and does occur. But I could come around the corner one day and find Karula, Quarantine, and her 2 cubs contentedly sharing an impala. It's unlikely, but that's the strange sort of things that leopards do, especially within families of leopards. They're not social creatures, they're not geared towards socialization, but odd things happen. Flop. Now, the one thing Mr. Q is exceptionally good at is hunting kudu. It seems to be his speciality, and it seems as though James has found some of his favorite food.
I didn't realize that Quarantine was a kudu fan. Well, he's not going to eat these ones. They're quite a long way from him. They're on Arethusa. They're eating themselves something that you and I would not like to eat. It is tambuti. You and I would be rendered either dead or on the loo for a very extended period were we to eat any of the things that one on the left is eating. I haven't seen kudu for some time, you know. Well, I mean, not months or anything like that, but they seem to be a little scarcer, and that's simply, of course, because the bush has got thicker, and they live in thick bush, where they eat leaves. That one's eating whiteberry bush. This one is looking at us very nicely. Robin B., you've asked a question that is difficult to answer. You say, what is the tooth structure of an antelope? Robin, the tooth structure of an antelope is difficult. I mean, do you want the entire dental formula? I'm afraid I cannot give you the entire dental formula. But what I can tell you is that it has, I think it's 6 incisors. So they are only on the bottom. So 6 incisors on the bottom. There's just a pad of sort of cartilaginous gum on the top. So when they crop the trees like that, they're not going like you and I might. They don't have top incisors. Then as you move towards the back, I think you've got molars and premolars in much the same way that you and I have, but they've kind of started to look like each other. The premolars are not, there are no canines. The premolars and molars are flat, grinding surfaces. And if you ever see a dead antelope, what you can find is that the grinding teeth have got ridges on them, and so that when an antelope chews to the side, they chew in a sort of circular motion, and they grind the food between those molars into the smallest possible pieces before swallowing it. And that's the second time round, I mean. They'll basically just fill up the first stomach now. They're ruminants like cows, so they'll fill the first stomach with almost unchewed leaves, and then they'll go and find a shady spot, vomit it up into their mouths, and then they'll begin that inexorable and endless grinding process. It has got so hot here, despite the earliness of the morning. Now I'm just going to see if we can't go around the corner here. Chris, now you're wondering about the white stripes, and I'm actually just going to quickly ask Dave to show you the kudu again. I wanted to go around the corner here because I know there was a buffalo killed, and I thought we might be able to find the teeth there. Those stripes, Chris, give it a kind of broken up outline in thick bush like this, with the dappled shade. Yes, we are still with the kudu. Thank you, Kirsten. So there's a stripe there. The stripes there just kind of break the outline slightly, and it almost looks like it's different kinds of shadow falling. And I think to our eyes, which see detail very well, that's not particularly clever camouflage, but I think to an animal like a lion or a leopard, quarantine for example, they don't see detail in the same way we do, and so I think that might be slightly confusing, especially if you're seeing in black and white. Now let me just pop my head around the corner here. There was a buffalo kill here one Sunday morning, very nasty Sunday morning for the buffalo, and I'm wondering if its bottom mandible isn't here, and we could then maybe have a look at its dentition. It was killed here by the Nkahuma Pride. I just saw some bones, but not the head. But I mean, that basically wraps up the dentition discussion. I don't know exactly what the dental formula is. I haven't remembered it all. It'll vary slightly between antelope. But basically, you've got molars on top and bottom, premolars in front of those, which are almost like modified molars. They've just kind of flat grinding surfaces, no canines, no top incisors, just bottom incisors like mine. And so when the kudu speaks, it speaks like this. Good. Very nice. Oh, there's a Shivambalani, an emerald spotted wood dove. Right, we'll continue going along the Marikeni drainage line, mainly because there's a lot of shade here, which is what we want. There's also mercifully quite a lot of signal. And I'm also hoping perhaps for some plumbago flowers. They seem to have been very early this year. So the plumbagos are purple or white flowers that come in these drainage line areas, and these are plumbago plants that you can see just kind of on the ground on either side of the drainage here, but none of them have flowers on them anymore. I'm just going to drive very slowly through here and see if we can't find some tracks of Tingana, or maybe a lion, or maybe another kudu. Maybe another hyena, that would be nice. At the moment, not much. I'll just quickly give you a little indication. Oh, I missed it. Many of you will have seen this before, but I just said that the kudu, of course, were happily eating this tambuti plant. And of course the tambuti plant is, well, it's full of that very toxic latex. You see that, David? Do you see how toxic it is? There, that white stuff there is very toxic. You do not want to eat it. Now apparently Brent's nearly impossible tree quiz was on the tambuti. He must have picked you just a very small piece of it, because I know many of you know the tambuti very well. Now, of course, if you are a researcher and you research what animals eat and you research what they eat by collecting their dung, I mean, you might be able to identify a tambuti leaf from sort of that much. That's all you'd find in a kudu's dung. So if you were very clever, you'd be able to tell me what that is. I would definitely not be clever enough to be researching what kudu eat from their dung. Let us continue. Right, Quarantine is still lying asleep without a kudu. Let's go and find out if Jamie's managed to coax him into getting up to doing anything useful for the rest of the drive.
No coaxing has happened here, and Quarantine seems to be very content at the moment and very much enjoying his morning nap. He's not completely flat though. Well, he is now, but he wasn't a second ago, and he keeps lying down and then lifting his head and lying down and lifting his head, and I think perhaps he's decided that this is a good spot to spend the rest of the day. And the reason I think that is because we're between two water holes. Now there is a little bit to the south and to the west of us, there is a water hole known as Cheetah Plains Pan. Now there is a vast open area that lies between where we are and Cheetah Plains Pan itself. And of course, open areas are not really a leopard's friend. They are secretive stealth hunters, they're ambush hunters, and when there's no cover, you can't ambush something, which Quarantine will know. And probably what he's thinking about doing is a lot of the time, animals will move about around the open areas, especially at night or in the cool of the morning. But as it starts to get hotter, they start to want shade, and they'll move and cover, and they'll start to move into the thickets surrounding a waterhole. And there is, well, here actually, is where Quarantine will come into his own in terms of ambushing something. So he's going to doze away, save up his energy, and wait for some unsuspecting creature to either go and have a drink, or perhaps come from having a drink and seek out some shade. And he's going to rely upon his incredible sense of hearing to alert him to the presence of an animal moving about in his vicinity. And so there's no point for him right now to go searching. He's just got to wait. Ian and Kira, who are 9 and 6 years old. Welcome to Ian and Kira. You want to know, how far does Q roam? Well, Ian and Kira, he roams very far now with a young male leopard. Oh, you're dreaming. You're awake now. Just getting comfortable. With a young male leopard, they can actually walk very, very far. So they can walk hundreds of kilometers, hundreds of miles in search of a territory. Now, Q hasn't needed to walk quite so far. He's found himself a nice spot close to his mom's territory. But his territory is probably roughly the size, or at least the area that he moves around in, and let me just think about this for a second, is probably at least the size of 2,000 football fields. Maybe even a little bit more. Now, I don't know exactly because I haven't spent enough time with Q, and he isn't found all that often. He can be quite secretive unless he's on Cheetah Plains and in Coral. And of course, he does move about around in the Kruger as well. So we don't know exactly how far he roams or exactly how far he goes. But if I had to guess, I'd say maybe somewhere around 2,000 football fields. And when he gets bigger, that could actually be even as big as 4,000 football fields. So it could be even larger. That's just to give you a sort of a rough sense of scale. That's in hectares, by the way, for those of you watching, give or take a little bit. So it's actually a massive, massive area. He covers Cheetah Plains and Coral, Torchwood, and Kruger as well. Right, if you are determined to keep your head down there, Mr. Q, then I'm going to go all the way around. I keep calling him Q and then immediately thinking of James Bond. I'm thinking about repositioning and going around and perhaps trying from the facial angle as opposed to the bottom view. So while I decide whether or not to do that, let's go over to Brent with one of the most brightly coloured birds.
Look at that, the most exquisitely coloured starling, the amethyst, plum-coloured or violet-backed starling. All names have been used. There we go. I don't know if we can hear. It's called that very distinct call. Oh, off they go. Now the males are that brilliant color, and the females are drab, brown and spotty, and actually you can see groups of males fighting for the females' attentions. Now we've made our way across the little river system. We're now on the more open side, and there's this lovely game path that we're going to stroll down. And because we're on foot, and I've been thinking quite a bit about early man, I mean, we started with that sort of little bit of history about the Sabi Sands and quarantine in particular, that it's amazing that in the last 30 years, Africa, or Southern Africa's history is slowly being rewritten, so for the last 1,000 years or so. So it was always assumed that the different African cultures sort of were very separate from each other and used to war with each other. But now it's been shown that on certain big routes between rivers and things like that, of course the Arabs have also been trading with this eastern part of Africa for many, over 1,000 years. Now, when we go on a long journey in South Africa, we get these sort of ultra-city type things. So it's a petrol station, there's a bathroom, I think maybe call them truck stops in the US. I'm not sure what you call them elsewhere, but there's a shop, food, restaurants, all that type of stuff. Now, can you believe that existed hundreds of years ago in Africa in a different form? So, and generally on sort of Inselbergs are sort of standalone mountains, and basically there was the world's oldest profession happening. There was massive pots of grain that they've been found now, I mean taller than me, filled with food, and so it was a spot to have a sleep, a rest for a couple of days, and it was on all the big trade routes. And also when it comes to mining and that, we think it's a very European thing. Bavenda and the Tonga have been mining gold in the hills above here and also to the north. Massive walled cities of Great Zimbabwe, Mapungubwe, golden sculptures, and that's all well before the arrival of the European. Now, the Arabs would trade. The closest Arab city to here is actually not that far away in northern Mozambique. So all the major river systems and their tributaries would have been used as obviously routes, because water is the most important thing. So if you take the Zambezi, the next biggest sort of river valley is the Limpopo, and the Limpopo has got tree species that you don't find anywhere else. In South Africa, you've got tamarind trees, which are of course indigenous originally to India. Now, tamarinds have been indigenous to Africa for over 1,000 years, but they only grow along these old caravan routes, sometimes slave caravan routes, spice caravan, ivory, gold, iron. So can you imagine the Arab traders of 1,000 years ago sucking on a tamarind seed? Very nice, actually. I used to eat them a lot when I lived in East Africa. And then while I'm walking, I'm going to go buy some elephant tusks from the hinterland. I'm going to flick my tamarind seed out, and of course along here it's grown. And also you've got things like Zanzibar figs, which are endemic to Zanzibar Island, but they grow on these river systems all throughout the east coast of Africa. So it's really fascinating, and I think because a lot of the history was oral rather than written, that a lot of that's been lost, and slowly but surely, as we take a deeper look into all these things, we are learning so much more about the history of Africa. Now, of course, one of the reasons why Africa didn't develop at the same rate as Europe, for example, is because of abundance. We live in quite a nice climate. I mean, it's hot, but hot's better than cold. As long as you got water, you can survive hot. But so Europe evolved, not evolved is the incorrect word, developed sort of their thick walls, windows, machinery, all that type of stuff a lot faster than Africa, because they had to. Here in Africa, I mean, if you're on a nice river, you've got a floodplain, you can grow enough food to feed your family, depending on when you do get droughts and floods. But on average, and if you're a good hunter, you can set snares, you can catch things, you can catch buffalo, you can catch elephant if you're brave enough. So there was never a need to sort of really Sorry, I just had a shadow fly over me. It was a battle going into the sun. Now, if you spotted behind me, there's a person walking with me. That's Herbie, and he's also just making sure that we're safe while we wander around. While I'm talking to you, he's my eyes and ears, looking for buffalo and elephants and lions and things. And so, as I was saying, it's incredible how. Especially sort of a lot of the original thinking, old world Europe, oh, Africa's this backward place, the savages in loincloths. But it's because they lived in a much nicer spot than they did. There was enough food, there was enough water, and it was really incredible how we learn about this stuff. Hi, Leopold. Leopold is wondering, when did my family arrive in South Africa? So 1820, Leopold, so we're just under 200 years in southern Africa. Originally arrived in the port of Grahamstown, which is on the east coast of South Africa in the Eastern Cape. And then after not too many years in Grahamstown, we moved further to the north, and most of my family was set up in what is now considered the Natal Midlands. So very beautiful part of South Africa, very good farming area, and of course I've got a slightly strange surname. My surname is Leo Smith. Now, it changed in 1820. So in 1820 I was a smith, but there were so many Smiths on the first boat out of England that we are the Smiths that came from Leopold. So we had our name changed there, so there wasn't so much confusion when they're like, Smith, and then 20 people go, yes. So we're the Smiths that come from Leopold. So and originally from the village of York, as far as I know, is where our family stems from. But I don't consider myself English at all. I consider myself very truly African. I would be lost in the UK, or I get lost in the UK. So one of the strangest things about that stuff is when... What has Herbie spotted? What have you seen before? Tracks of an ingwe, tracks of a leopard. Let's have a quick look. But so we'll get to the leopard tracks now. One of the strangest things that I find when I travel outside of Africa, so most of Africa, we're very outdoor people, and you walk outdoors, you travel outdoors in vehicles and cars. So, and I consider myself to have an excellent sense of direction. It's very seldom I get lost. If I drive somewhere once, I can remember how to get there again. But put me in a subway system, and I am gone. So, because I know I walk into the subway, okay, there's north, there's south, there's east, there's west, I know everything. And then you go into the subway, and you've gone in facing south, and you go around and through and whatnot, and then you come out facing west, and it literally, and especially New York was the worst for me, because all those tall buildings, I used to sit there like this going, oh my goodness, where am I can't see the sun. It was also February, it's raining, the wind's howling, and I don't know where I'm going. And fortunately I found most in New York is very friendly and able to direct me in the right direction. Okay, let's go see if we can see these leopard tracks. I think these are quite old. These are from Karula a day or two ago, because this is where she was coming to fetch the cubs from. So they crossed here. Herb. Ah, there we go, so they're up here. Yeah, unfortunately not very fresh, and I'm just trying to see if there's a clearer one. There isn't. So I think this is when she had that kill with Shongile not too far from here that we found on foot. You can see the edges are really, really worn from the wind, and so unfortunately not fresh tracks at all. Okay, well, speaking of leopards, rather than look at the sort of hint of a leopard track that was here 3 days ago, let's go look at a big male leopard with Jamie.
Our big male leopard that would leave very big footprints in the sand is fast asleep. He is quite content to spend, I think, the rest of his day here. So what I've done is I've marked the position on my map, because we really are about as far from a road as we could possibly be out here on Cheetah Plains. So I've marked his position on a map so that this afternoon on the sunset safari we'll be able to return to him and see whether or not he has had any success. I'm very chuffed with the way that this morning has gone. I did say to James earlier this morning, I'm going to try for quarantine on Cheetah Plains. And we're so lucky that he obliged. There was one moment there when we were approaching the sighting, and Ryan called me in and said, Jamie, he's going north, which would have been north into Nkoro. We got lucky that he decided to keep sauntering south. Thank you, boy. Yes. Now, Kelly, while our leopard snoozes away, you wanted to know how long do leopards spend sleeping in a day. It's very circumstance dependent. So if it, for example, a female like Karula, she actually spends very little of her day, well, in cat terms, very little of her day sleeping, unless she has a kill, in which case she could spend easily 12 to 20 hours cat napping away. But for the most part, if she doesn't have a kill, she will be wandering around searching for food. She's got 2 cubs to provide for. So she missions. Even at the hottest time of the day, you can find leopards moving around. They're very unpredictable like that. But they can, much like their lion cousins, they can happily sleep for 20 hours a day. If they've got a full belly and a comfortable, safe spot, they're going to spend most of that time cat napping. They're not terribly concerned about being awake. They'll go and find themselves a safe spot if they've got a kill, safe spot in the tree. They can doze contentedly knowing that nothing's going to attack them up there. So they are almost as good at lions as sleeping. As lions at sleeping, is the words I was trying to use. But as a general rule, they tend to sleep less. And of course, they're generally mobile throughout the night, moving throughout the night. They'll stop and rest every now and again, stop and lie down every now and again. And I have to say that a lot of my surprise leopard sightings have been in the middle of the day as well. I remember going out once with Scott on camera, and we just said, because we'd had to go out late because it was so hot, our camera kept shutting down. We just said we are going to struggle this afternoon. And we came around the corner, and there was Tingana sleeping in the shade, and then he got up and continued to move, despite the fact that it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit. While our beautiful leopard snoozes away, we're going to start making our way back towards Djuma. Let's go and see what Brent has found for you there.
So as the heat of the day builds, the thermals have started to build, and the raptors are starting to ride those thermals. There's a juvenile batelier that Jeandre is following there. It's riding a thermal, although bateliers tend to fly a little bit lower than the other vulture species. There were some vultures, but they caught a thermal and are now mere pinpricks in the sky. Now, the batalier's got some of the best eyesight of all the birds of prey, and especially the scavenging ones, and they're generally the first with the tawny eagle to spot a carcass, and they're quite good at spotting carcasses the vultures miss, such as leopard carcasses in trees or under bushes. And when you find a tawny eagle and a batelier sitting together in the same tree, you can almost be 100% convinced that there is some form of meat close by. Now, we're doing what most sensible creatures in this heat would do, and that's stand in the shade, but we're going to move out of it now, and we're going to move towards a weeping wattle that is flowering, so I'm hoping we're going to find some cool bugs there. Now, it's the same area where last week VM and I spotted a black mamba. Oh, darn it. I know someone was asking for butterflies. There's a little sulfur tip. Oh, it's not. It is a sulfur tip, but there's more than one type of sulfur tip. Oh, I've forgotten this one. I don't have my little butterfly book. And you see the orange on the outside. Oh, they're so difficult. James was asking for a butterfly. Well, there we go. What I am hoping is that when we get to the flowering weeping wattle, we might find a bit more. So that's one of the little sulfur tip. You see the orange on the outside of the wing. Some of them have, the tipped butterflies. You've got velvet, you've got indigo, you've got sulfur, red. yellow. Oh, there's a lot of them. I'm going to have to get into my book to find out exactly which one that is. James, remind me on the sunset safari, and I'll see. I've got a little butterfly checklist with pictures now of this area, so we can work through that checklist together. Okay, let's move our way towards the flowering Peltiforum. Hopefully it's going to be full of butterflies that are not fluttering away. Now, while we make our way across the baking scorched earth of quarantine, I'm only joking, of course, it is getting quite warm though. Let's go see how Commander Bond is doing in his car.
Sure, how on earth Leo Smith can possibly be getting warm when he has not traversed further than quarantine clearings today. Still, it is getting warm, he's absolutely correct. There was a bird of prey, it flown away. Then I saw a pin-tailed wider, which I'm sure many of you would love to have seen. It flew over the top of our heads. We stopped, slammed on anchors, ground the car into reverse, headed backwards. David fell off, the camera disappeared, and I put on the bird app to call it because they are very territorial, and I thought it will certainly come and show itself to everybody. And all we could hear on the bird app, it was clearly recorded in a town, was dogs barking, children fighting, and very faintly in the background a pin-tailed wider. And so the pin-tailed wider that we saw here, which is a proper wilderness pin-tailed wider, thought, to hell with that, I'm not coming towards them. Now David, I'm going to challenge you something cruel here. In this tree has landed an oriole, and I believe it to be either the African golden oriole, which I believe would be a SafariLIVE first if we get it on camera, or the European golden oriole, which wouldn't be a first, but it would be an unusual one. They're very scared, David. It might fly away, so if it does, be very quick. It's in this bit of tree here. Well, that's where it landed. I see a flash of yellow there. I'm going to... What I'm going to ask you to do, David, is just focus in on that, or zoom in on that bit of bush that I indicated. I'll try and do it again. I'm sure he's in there. This is going to be our best spot here. You see the thick bit kind of right through the gap there? Yep. I think he's in there. Let's try and call him. It of course could just be an ordinary black-headed version, in which case I shall be embarrassed and irritated at the same time. I'm just going to quickly find him. Nothing yet, eh, Dave? Nope. Alright, let's call the European first. Listen to that, isn't that gorgeous? But it's not calling, is it, David? Nor is it moving. Okay, let's try the African one. No. No luck there. How very disappointing. It has pulled a fast one, David. I will show you a picture, everybody, just so that you will believe me. Oh, for Oriole. shouldn't really read a book while you're driving a car. It's very dangerous. There they are. And it's 1 and 2 that I think I saw there. Gorgeous. Can't believe you've never seen yellow like that in your life. I was asked the other day, what is my favorite color? And I said, navy blue and yellow. And why yellow? This person said to me, and I said, well, yellow just makes me happy. Right, Pajamas is on her way back from Cheetah Plains. Let's find out how that's going. And I will see you close to where Brent is on quarantine clearings.
We are racing along the shortest route back home. Unfortunately, we did have to leave quarantine because our special guests from Nat Geo, the Nat Geo Filmmakers Award competition, are leaving today. So we've got to make sure that we get them home in time for a hearty breakfast before we put them on a plane. We are scurrying back towards Djuma, and of course the joy of Happiness is cooking. Happiness is the lady that is looking after us at the moment whilst Amanda is on leave, and she's very appropriately named Happiness because her food brings great joy to all of us. I'm quite excited. Personally, I'm hoping for pancakes. But that will have to remain a surprise, and we've still got quite a way to go before we get there. So a big thank you to Brian for his wonderful camera work. Thank you, Brian. And a big thank you to all of you for joining us and for sending through your questions, comments, and keeping us company. We'll see you on the Sunset Safari, hopefully with the gorgeous quarantine. Until then, bye-bye, everybody.
So there haven't been many flowers, which I was really hoping to find, but I have found my first Evolvus of the rainy season, a tiny little blue Evolvus. Or a blue haze is its common name, and they are absolutely exquisite little flowers. No fancy stories or funny things. I mean, just try to put it against there so it doesn't move as much. How's that, Chandra?
No.
No, too.
It's my shade.
Okay, so they're just very, very pretty little flowers. Now, they are an indicator species of disturbed soils, so you generally find them on the edge of roads or areas of big animal paths, but they are exquisitely beautiful. I think I'll pop it behind my ear. How's that look? Do I look fetching?
Gorgeous.
Gorgeous, why, thank you.
Ravishing.
So it's been wonderful having you on the bushwalk with us. And of course, it's always great to get out and get some of Africa's dirt on your feet and look at the small things. And been quite fun discussing a bit of history in the area. And it's not something we talk about too often, but it is something I'm completely fascinated in. And I will try keep, maybe once a week we'll do a little history segment, maybe not only on South Africa, but Africa in general. Hi, Becky. Becky would like to know if I grew up with Afrikaans as my first language. No, I'm afraid not, Becky. I grew up with English as my first language, but more interesting than that is a blue pansy in the shade. For James, who's after butterflies, he's going to open his wings in a short second. Have you got him? Okay, so you see the little yellow flower thingy? And to the right of that, just into the shade, it looks like almost like a piece of bark on the ground. I'm going to try to show you, get a bit closer. I don't want it to fly away. I'm going to go around you, try and approach it from a different angle. Oh, there we go. Ah, it's on that log now, on that big piece of log. Got it. So there we go, James, another butterfly. Now, as it's got warmer, the butterfly is also going to start coming out. That is a pansy, very pretty butterfly. As you saw, as it opens its wings, it shows the blue. It's not opening its wings. Let me try get it to open its wings for you as I walk a little closer. Oh, it's going to flutter off as most flutterbys do. Well, Isn't that fun? Butterflies, history, and the fun type of history. And as I said, we're going to try and discuss a little bit more of history of Africa, animals and everything in the next coming weeks. So it's been wonderful. Jandre has managed not to fall over and not put too many thorns in those massive calves of his. That's always a relief. So we're going to say adieu. We'll see you on the Sunset Safari, but let's go see what Commander Bond is up to.
I'm here on quarantine clearings, everybody, and I'm afraid my scouring the landscape for orioles and such creatures, I'm afraid has borne no fruit as yet. We have a few minutes left. We might be very lucky. But what we can show, David, is all of those vultures starting to take to the air as the heat rises off the ground. Hello, Janie, sorry, I asked you earlier if you were a new viewer, and where you were from. You are indeed a new viewer. This is your third safari, and you say you're from the United States. Well, Janie, the United States is a very vast place indeed. Could you tell us where in the United States? In Indiana, there we go. Right, those are white-backed vultures we've been looking at. And then David is about to hit a batelier, I think. Yes, he is. Well done, David. Male batelier, so known. You can tell it's a male, of course, by the fact that it has black on the back of the wings. I was trying to think of something pithy to say there, but I failed on account of the fact that my head is now starting to boil. I think those are white-backed. Those are not white-backed vultures. Those are tawny eagles. That is very cool. One of them is a pale-form tawny. Oh! Dogfight! Are they pale-form tawnies? Just keep watching them, everybody. Keep watching them. I'm just going to quickly open the book because I have not seen a pale-form tawny eagle here before. So that would be strange to me. But it might just be a normal form with a sort of palish underwing. They're very variable. Yeah, it could easily be an immature. Unless it's an immature steppe eagle, but I don't think so. They're gone, Davy.
Yep. Just above us.
Yeah, I think they're immature tawnies. There, that's what they look like to me from underneath.
Yeah, that looks right.
They're having another fight. I know there's no way you'll get that, though. Not unless you break the camera and your neck at the same time. But hang on, there's another one. Not vultures in the slightest. And one of them, no, there's a batelier that's calling. Anyway, I'm going to go with immature tawny eagle. I'm happy to take any debate on it, if you would like to debate me on it. During the last 40 seconds or so of our drive. Marvellous. Well, I'm afraid that's the end of your safari, everybody. Thank you, David, for your efforts today. I do appreciate the time you took to come on safari with me. Yes, and a big thank you to all of you for talking us through what has been, well, shall we say, not the most action-packed morning, but we had some beautiful birds. So we will see you later during the Sunset Safari. That will be from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock, Central African time. Until then,